Hey folks, it's Cody Stoffer with Playmakers Corner, here to tell you about Code Red Coaching. Competing in athletics means you've lifted the weights, you've watched film, and you've got the passion. Problem is, that's what everyone else in the state has done. Perfect your game by honing in on your mental performance with Code Red Coaching. Whether you are a team or an individual, Code Red Coaching has the tools to create mentally solid habits and set up you or your team for success. Find Code Red Coaching at coderedcoaching.com or call 720-979-1914 to learn more today. That's coderedcoaching.com or 720-979-1914 today. Now back to the show.
What's good, y'all? Coach V here, and I got your 1A recap here for Week 5. Let's go ahead and hop into it. It's not a long recap. No game on Thursday this week, only games on Friday and Saturday, but still a lot of teams not playing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into this one here. So Saturday, that is the 22nd, 2023 here. We had a couple games here. Platte Canyon would go ahead and blow out the Pinnacle here, 54-0. That's pretty much as expected. Monte Vista got a big win here over Peyton, 52-14. That's a huge confidence booster for them. And that one, Jacob Pacheco rushed for 136 yards and 3 touchdowns, having a hat trick. Azaria Hurtado had 3 receptions, 40 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. And the defense with 2 fumble recoveries in a big-time win over Peyton. Moving on here, Del Norte falls to Salada 12-30. Centauri would take care of business against Bayfield 41-16. North Fork wins a close one versus Cedar Edge 35-25. Senior athlete for North Fork, Daniel Owens, had 155 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 9 tackles, 1 sack in a big time win over there. Cedar Ridge putting up a bigger fight than I think some people would have expected, but a good one regardless. Strasburg goes ahead and they hammer Bennett for the second year in a row, 49-8 here in this one. Landon Martin going crazy, 3 of 6 for 32 passing yards and a touchdown, but 12 carries for 153 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, looking like white Michael Vick out there doing his thing and leading them to a big dub. Also big games from Paul Smith, who had 95 rushing yards and a touchdown. Thomas Devlin, 100 yards and 2 touchdowns as they continue to take care of business down the stretch, going into their league games here pretty soon. Speaking of taking care of business and going into their league games, we have Banning Lewis Academy absolutely blasting Rocky Ford, as expected though, 47-8. Chase Real, 120 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. Joseph Briegovich putting himself in the Offensive Playmaker of the Year conversation, 4 receptions, 91 receiving yards, 3 receiving touchdowns, as Banning Lewis is undefeated going into league play. Highland unfortunately loses to University 42-15. Gunnison takes care of business versus Coal Ridge 40-0. Rye does the same thing against Trinidad 47-0. Ignacio loses to Montezuma Cortez 24-0. So there you go there. Moving on to the Saturday games. Estes Park versus Ellicott. This one would end up being a very close game. A lot closer than some people would have imagined, but Estes Park survives Ellicott 44-40. A back and forth game that did result in a touchdown pass completed with a minute to go to take the lead here for Estes Park. And then Estes would go ahead and get a game-winning interception to seal that game there. Like I said, winning a close one, 44-40. Manuel gets back on the winning train here and beats Grandview 46-22. Clear Creek gets the win, a forfeit win over Sheridan. Lyman, this was a big matchup here, plays Buena Vista and beats them 21-0. This was a pretty close game, but Lyman would run away with this one here. Logan Bottier, 70 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 4 tackles, a Playmaker of the Week worthy performance. Jordan Rockwell, though, 6 of 11 passing, 77 yards, 17 rushing yards, but on defense was big time, 4 tackles and a pick 6 there that would give them their 3rd score, or would eventually put them up 3 scores there. Caleb Camp for Buena Vista played well, 6 receptions, 95 yards, but unfortunately Buena Vista loses a close one to Lyman. If you're BV, you gotta feel good about that. For Lyman, I mean, you gotta feel good about winning, but obviously always things to work on. And then last game of the night here, we have Woodland Park versus Colorado Springs Christian. And Woodland Park with the upset, 24-7 here. A whopping 6 interceptions from this defense here, just shutting down that passing game over there. And then shout out junior athlete that is Aiden Hood from Woodland Park. He had 67 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdowns, 11 tackles, and an interception in a big-time performance against Colorado Springs Christian there, as Woodland Park, I believe, also gets their first win of the season. So there you go there, a very quick 1A recap. Make sure you check out our power ranking section where we talk about some of these teams and the outlook moving forward.
Hello, beautiful people. How are you all doing today? My name is Gideon Agner, and today I will be going through and doing your 2A recap of Week 5 in Colorado High School football. So we're going to start with our Thursday game, go through to our Friday matchups, and finally end with our Saturday matchups. I am recording this at about noon on Sunday, September 24th, so if you are upset that stats are not mentioned in this recap, well, they haven't been entered as of September 24th of this season. So, let's start with our lone Thursday game in the 2A classification, which was D'Evelyn versus Alameda. D'Evelyn would come out on top in this matchup, 42-6. And looking at it, D'Evelyn is the only team that has input stats for this one. First, we see Kevin Felden, the sophomore quarterback out of D'Evelyn. He went 20 for 33 for 280 passing yards and 5 touchdowns, which is pretty incredible. On the ground, we see that the leader in rushing yards was Sambo Heng. He had 10 carries for 56 yards, and then Noah Allen, the junior, had 8 carries for about 20 yards. Receiving, the leader in that category was Russell Balcher, 7 receptions for 101 yards. Then we have Brad Fuller for 99 yards, Adam Wen for 55, Cole Hauer for 25, and then Bryce Woolley for 13 yards. Looking at the all-purpose yards, we also see that Michael Oren and Graham Truesdell each had 27 and 22 interception return yards, respectively. And then Noah Allen and Hector Lean had 7 and 8 kick return yards. Well, each on their own. Looking at tackles here, KB Fiondu, Jay Arik, Sambo Heng, Connor Ferris, and Hector Lean each had 4 tackles. Fiondu had 2 tackles for loss, and Ferris had 1. Then we also see that Truesdale, Brad Fuller, Woolley, and Carter Larson each had 3 tackles. Fiondu also had 2 sacks, and then Connor Ferris, he had 1 of his own. As mentioned previously, Oren and Truesdale each had an interception, but Truesdale also had a fumble recovery. KB Fiondu, he had a forced fumble and a recovery. Then we also see that Mateo Acosta had a recovery as well. Adam Wen and Connor Ferris each did force a fumble. We see that Hector Lean, the senior, he had 1 punt for 55 yards. And then that is all of the stats that have been entered for D'Evelyn for this game. So now we will move on to our Friday games, where first we have Brush falling to Rifle 14-28. The Beat Diggers having a little bit of a rough season after what a lot of people thought would be a good one. Looking at Brush, we see that Logan Gross went 10 for 28 completion-wise for 142 yards, through a touchdown and a pick. Rushing, we see that Gross, he did make up for that pick. He had 167 yards on the ground for 2 touchdowns. Then we also have Isaac Valencia with 25 rushing yards, Omar Silva with 23 and a touchdown. And that's the only other guy with over 10 rushing yards. Receiving-wise, we see that Ryland Lane, a sophomore, 3 receptions for 53 yards. Isaac Valencia, 2 receptions for 31. Sterling Cook, 1 catch for 25 yards. Dante Rios and Omar Silva each had 1 reception, Rios for 17 yards and Silva for 10. Then when we are looking at the defensive statistics, Jesus Martinez, he had 10 tackles. Lane, Cabe McGregor, and Troy Mataya each had 7. Mataya, he had a tackle for loss. Gross Efren Bustillos, each of those guys had 6 tackles. Isaac Valencia and Davison each had 5. Sterling Cook had 4, and then Silva had 3. Moving on to hurrying statistics, we do not have any. But in terms of in the air and fumble statistics, first we see Gross had an interception for 8 yards. Omar Silva, Isaac Valencia, and Washington each had a pass deflection. Sterling Cook had 2 of them things. Washington, he had a forced fumble and a recovery. Gabe McGregor had... I'm sorry, I hope I'm seeing this right, but Gabe McGregor had 7 forced fumbles? I hope I'm reading that right, because that would be insane. Then we also have Kevin Arvizo, who had 1 forced fumble. And Troy Mataya, he had 2 fumble recoveries. In terms of kickoffs, Martinez, he had 5 kickoffs for 258 yards and a touchback. Valencia had 2 punts for 68 yards, the junior, so he's putting himself in my personal good graces there. Rylan Lane, 2 kickoff returns for 14 yards. And then Sterling Cook, 2 for 2 on PATs there. And yeah, so Omar Silva, Logan Gross, and Sterling Cook were the guys that scored touchdowns in this game. And Gross, he also had a conversion on the ground. So Logan Gross playing some really good ball here both ways over Brush. Next, we'll take a look at Berthoud, who ended up winning over the Lamar Thunder 26-0 after they had traveled the 6 hours to get down to Lamar. So looking at the box score here, we see Darren Davidson 9 for 17 for 159 passing yards and 2 touchdowns there. 4 carries for 12 yards on the ground as well, and a touchdown there. Alex Larson, 109 rushing yards, no touchdowns, but Joey Finnegan with 51 rushing yards and a touchdown. Cole Bialek, he had 57 rush yards, and Hoffmeister had 17. Looking at the receiving numbers, you see Cade Anderson was the main guy in the air for the Spartans, and on 2 receptions, he got 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Petrowski, 3 receptions for 37 yards, and then Aiden McGrath mimicked Petrowski's numbers. Justin Mills also had an interception, or not an interception, a reception for 15 yards. Looking at the defensive stats in this one, Aiden McGrath and Joey Finnegan each had 13 tackles, proving that this is one of the stronger defenses in 2A. Then we see Elisha Mosher. He had 11 tackles, and Araya Chacon, he had 10. Hoffmeister and Cole Bialek each had 8. Benjamin Schroeder, had 7. Daniel Mahoney, he had 6, and then Jace Newbill, Donovan Mann, and Sean Barajas, along with Pulowski, each had 4. Elijah Mosher and Joey Finnegan each had 2 sacks, and then Chacon, Bialek, and Peyton Evans had a hurry apiece. In terms of other defensive statistics, Mahoney had 2 pass deflections, while Chacon, Jaden Michaelis, and Elijah Mosher and Aiden McGrath each had 1. Sean Barjas had a fumble recovery. Jaden Michaelis also had an interception. And then, I hope I'm reading this right, because this says that Jace Newbill had 4 interceptions, which puts him in the upper part of the state. Across all classifications. Jace Newbill, the sophomore cornerback, so he's going to be someone for us to keep our eyes on moving forward. So, very good job there by Jace. Also, Benjamin Schroeder, he had 5 kickoffs for 270 yards and 3 touchbacks. Davidson, also 3 punts for 111 yards for an average of 37 yards. Cade Anderson had 1 kickoff return for 10 yards. And then Davidson also had a conversion. Weirdly enough, the potentially all PMC kicker, Ben Schroeder, he missed both of his PATs. So that's kind of interesting to think about. That'll be something to keep an eye on as we move forward. Next, we have Florence beating the Forge Christian Fury 29-11, which is one of the odder scores I have seen. if we're playing scoregami with that probably doesn't happen very much. Forge Christian scored a field goal in the third quarter, or not in the third, in the first quarter, and then a touchdown with a conversion in the fourth when it was basically done. Both teams have uploaded stats, so I'm going to start with Forge Christian here. Trace and he went 2 for 11 for 35 yards. Rushing-wise, Yuli Tafoya, he had 23 carries for 148 yards. Dante Vigil was the only other positive rusher. He had 77 carries, or not 77 carries, 77 yards for a touchdown. Receiving, Quinton Torres, 1 reception for 27 yards, and then Tafoya 1 for 8. Further, in terms of defensive statistics, Dante Vigil, 11 tackles, Carson Craig, 7, Will Reed with 4, and then Hunter Hall, Jamie Elliott, and Tafoya each with 3. Sullivan Strange had a sack and then also forced a fumble here. Yeah, all around, Noah Arter, he had a PAT and went 1 for 1 with a 20-yard field goal attempt. And that's really it for the Forge Christian Fury. Now, onto the Florence Huskies. We see Tanner Rast, the senior, 6 for 8 passing for 84 yards with a touchdown. Noah Howard, 3 for 6 for 31 yards. And then Lagoose Nuss, 0 for 1 for an interception. Rushing, though, Nuss put on a show. 18 carries for 171 yards and 2 scores. Noah Howard, 47 rush yards and a touchdown. Hunsberger with 17, and then Rast with 9 rush yards. In the air, we see the main target was Gage Goodall with 70 receiving yards and a score. Nuss with 22, and Tanner Rast with 18. Then we see tackle-wise. Rast also had 10 tackles, 2 of which were for loss. Gage Goodall, 9 for 1 for loss, along with Wyatt Dudley matching Goodall's numbers there. Gomez Garcia and Gunnar Bassetti each had 7. Bassetti had 2.5 tackles for loss there. Tucker Anderson with 4.5 for loss, and then Gabe Sullivan for half for loss there as well. Joey Hess and Bodie Taylor each had 3 tackles, and then moving to sacks, Noah Howard had a sack, along with Tucker Anderson and Bodie Taylor each having a hurry. Tucker Anderson, speaking of, he had a forced fumble. Wyatt Dudley did as well. Tanner Rast, he had himself a heck of a game. He had a blocked punt. Gomez Garcia had 2 pass deflections, and then Howard, he had an interception for 30 yards. All PMC caliber kicker, if I'm being honest here, Gunnar Phillips, he had 5 kickoffs for 273 yards and 2 touchbacks. He also punted 4 times for 120 yards. All around, he also went 3 for 3 at PATs, 0 for 1 on field goals, but it's all right. You can't get them all. And Gage Goodall had a conversion reception in this game as well. Next, we have the Weld Central Rebels taking on the Valley Vikings. The Rebels would beat the Vikings 22-7 here. There isn't a box score here, but this is concerning for the Rebels, considering they want to make a playoff push. And when you're beating a team only by 2 scores that has been routinely getting routed by 40, that isn't a great look looking forward. However, next we see the Bayfield Wolverines taking on the Centauri Falcons. Bayfield would lose this one 16-41. No stats here yet, but the box score says that Bayfield did make a push in the second half, actually outscoring the Falcons in the third quarter, but it didn't really end up mattering, so it is what it is there. Montezuma Cortez would end up playing the Ignacio Bobcats, and they would annihilate them 24-0. No stats on that one yet, but Montezuma Cortez looking to get back on track here. Unlikely to make a playoff push, but a good chance to ruin some days. Next, we have the Gunnison Cowboys taking down the Coleridge Titans 40-0. Coleridge has input their defensive stats here. You see Grayson Eason-Hart, he continues his run of dominance with 15 total tackles here. Carter Kuhn had 8 tackles. Dylan Miller and Benny Parida each had 5. And then we see that J.L. Houston, Seth Markiki, and Cameron Benke each had 3. We also find that Dylan Miller had an interception, and that is all we have for this game in terms of statistics. Next up, we have Delta routing the Academy 48-0. Both teams have input stats here. So, for the Academy, Jace Farmer went 8 for 21 passing for 113 yards. No touchdowns, but an interception. Rushing, nothing pretty here. The most yards that a guy has are 3, so let's not languish here. In terms of receiving, though, Zach Focal, he had 43 receiving yards. Aiden Smith had 42. Ben Marilot had 27, and then Sean Smith had 21. In terms of defense, the Academy has not entered defensive statistics, but Aiden Austin, 3 punts for 77 yards, and then Sean Smith had 4 kickoff returns for 62 yards. Now looking at the Delta Panthers here, you see Ty Reed 4 for 8 for 67 yards and a touchdown, and then Jet Ryan 1 for 4 for 47 yards and an interception. Rushing-wise, we see Giovanni Romero, 56 rush yards and a score. Talon Hewlett, 28 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jordan Zavala, 27 yards. Naso, he had 20 yards. Ty Reed, 3 carries for 16 yards and 2 scores. And then Jet Ryan, 1 carry for 10 yards and a touchdown. Then we see receiving, Rylan Bynum, 47 yards and a score, Deacon Sean, 47 yards, and then Landon Horn with 20 yards. Defensively, Jordan Frazier with 4 tackles, Tucker Johnson with 3 and 1 for loss, Nathan Brewer and Jordan Zavala with 2 each, and then tackle for loss or 2 there. In terms of sacks, Nathan Brewer with a sack, and then Xavier Martinez with 1 as well, and then Jet Ryan with 1. PAT-wise, Luis Ortiz, he went 6 for 7, and that's really it for Delta here. Next up, we have University taking down the Highland Huskies 42-15. Looking at the box score in this one, you see Johnny Wyrick 2 for 3 for 59 yards, and then Cole Crescent 9 for 14 with 73 yards. Wyrick also threw a touchdown in this one. Rushing, you see Brevin Doss, 173 yards for 2 scores. Jacob Cruz, 111 for 1, and then Cole Crescent, 77 for 2 touchdowns. And then Dylan Supp also had 22 rushing yards. Receiving, Will Corby, 70 yards and a touchdown. Doss with 34, and Dylan Supp with 12. On defense, we see that DeSantiago had 8 tackles, Gabe Puga had 6, Jacob Cruz and Titan Bentley each had 4, and then Gage Schminke and Medardo Abrego each had 3. Bentley, Caleb Bronner, AJ Schuler, and Schminke each had a couple of hurries. Puga, he had an interception and 2 pass deflections, and then DeSantiago had a pass deflection. Avery Sir had 6 kickoffs for 272 yards, and then Dylan Supp had 2 punts for 70 yards. All in all, pretty solid game for the Bulldogs over the Huskies. So, that we can look at Steamboat Springs taking on the Aspen Skiers. The Skiers would take down the Sailors 42-21, the battle of the occupations here. Steamboat has input a couple of defensive stats here. Aspen also only has defensive stats. So, looking at it for Steamboat Springs, Ryan Schott would have 4 tackles. Blue Wills would have 3, along with Finn Hartzell. And then Grayson Bacino would have an interception. The only stat for Aspen is that Dylan Micah had a pick and returned it for a touchdown, along with forcing a fumble. So that's all that we have for this game, but Aspen would double up the Sailors 42-21. Next up, we see that the Salida Spartans would take down the Del Norte Tigers 30-12. There are no box score stats for this one as of yet, but shout out to the homie Jake Hull on Salida. Hope you're doing well. Say hi to your pops for me. And then next up, we have my hometown team, Manitou Springs, who ended up having the most points of any 2A team this week 53-0 on top of Prospect Ridge Academy. The Miners didn't really have a great night, but Chase Knopf, he had a pretty alright passing night. He went 12 for 33 on completions for 169 yards. He did throw 2 interceptions, though. In terms of rushing, I'm not going to talk about that because it makes the team look bad. But receiving, we see Arnav Sudhir, he had 67 receiving yards. Brady McKinney had 39. Chris Byer had 31. And then Mashawn Puga, he had 25. In terms of kick return yards, we have McKinney, who had 52. Sudhir had 43. And then Mashawn Puga, he had 15. On defense, we see the main playmaker was McKinney with 4 total tackles. Isaac Rodriguez, Schaefer, Lennon Zabo, and Zachary Dika each had 3. In terms of sacks, McKinney had a sack and a hurry, and then Josh Ranjit, the freshman, had a fumble recovery. Brady McKinney and Schaefer each had a forced fumble. In terms of kickoffs, Sudhir, he had 1 kickoff for 33 yards, and then 4 punts for 41 total yards. PAT-wise, Sudhir went 0 for 1 on field goals as well. I've seen the film from this game, and so I can say what happened. It bounced off of the crossbar, so it was close. But also, we don't have the exact stats yet, but I can say for Manitou, Logan Moore, he had 3 rushing touchdowns and a pick 6, at least 100, maybe 150 yards. Then Nate Gensel threw 3 touchdowns. I think all 3 of them were to Preston Rhodes. Rhodes also had a pick 6 in this game. And so, yeah, pretty solid showing for the Mustangs heading into next week's matchup in the Battle of Ute Pass against Woodland Park. Now, heading into Sand Creek versus the Classical Academy. After being down, I believe, 24-21 at halftime, TCA would storm back and end up winning this game 51-32. And looking at the passing yards, Jackson Smentana, the sophomore, he went 7 for 17 for 72 yards and a touchdown. Rushing-wise, we have 200-yard rushers, Schiffer and Isaac Daggett. Schiffer had 129 yards for 2 touchdowns. Daggett had 107 yards. And then Sincere Edwards, 26 rush yards for 2 touchdowns. And then Michael Wu, 23 yards. And then Khalil Blush, 1 carry for 15 yards. Receiving, we see the main guy was Jaron Texer, 34 receiving yards. Tyler Stone, 19 yards. Will Schiffer, he had 11 yards and a touchdown. And then Khalil Blush, he had 5. J.D. Packard had 3. Then, looking forward at defense, Campbell Gaw, 12 tackles in this one. Michael Wu had 10. Edwards had 10 as well. Schiffer, he had 9. Gabriel Wright had 6. Elijah Wright had 4. And then Alex Gould and Luke Megahan each had 4 tackles with 1 for loss. And then Jaron Texer had 4 himself. Luke Megahan, he had a sack as well for 3 yards and a hurry. Edwards, he had 3 hurries. Cameron Steele, that is, had 2 hurries. And then Elijah Wright and Alex Gould had a hurry apiece. Defensively as well, Wright, Blush, and Wu each had a pass deflection. Wu also had a forced fumble. And then Texer had an interception for no yards. In terms of kickoffs, you see Kai Veronin, 5 kickoffs for 218 yards and 2 touchbacks. Nathaniel Thorne, 105 yards and 2 touchbacks. Thorne also 1 punt for 40 yards. I don't know what it is with TCA, but they are a kicking machine historically. Texer had 3 punt returns for 36 yards. Gould had 2 returns for 30 yards. Schiffer had 1 return for 15 yards, and then Matthew Wright had 1 kickoff return for 8 yards. All around, Nathaniel Thorne, he went 6 for 7 on PATs, and 1-on-1 on a field goal that was 39 yards. So very, very good job here to fight back by the Classical Academy. Next up, we have the Strasburg Indians taking down the Bennett Tigers, 49-8. Strasburg here has input stats, starting with Landon Martin, 3 for 6 completion for 32 yards and a touchdown. Rushing, Martin also had 153 yards and 3 scores here. You see Thomas Devlin, he had 100 yards for 2 touchdowns, and then Paul Smith had 95 rushing yards for a score. So you almost have 3 separate 100-yard rushers on top of Austin Velasco, who caught a reception for 20 yards and a touchdown, and then Damian Garcia, 9 receiving yards. On defense, you see that the main guy was Delvin, who had 12 tackles, 1 for loss. DJ Cannon had 11 with 2 for loss. Al Dickens had 9. Austin Velasco and Ian Bross each had 8. Jorge Parra and Cameron Manahan had 6. And then Paul Smith had 3. Jorge Parra and Austin Velasco each shared a sack for 7 yards. Jose Raul Valencia had 8 kickoffs for 435 yards and a touchback. Landon Martin had a punt for 32 yards, and Austin Velasco returned a punt for 16 yards. Raul Valencia, he went 7 for 7 on PATs here, so really solid game by Strasburg in this one. And finally, we have Englewood defeating Lincoln 43-0 on Friday. Englewood, Carson Campbell, 8 for 14 passing for 114 yards and 4 touchdowns. Receiving, that they haven't input any rushing yards, so supposedly all receiving, but Romeo Gonzalez, 2 receptions for 55 yards. Dion Robinson, 27 yards, and Dane Quintana with 14. Jace Prant and Dominic Deaver each had 9 receiving yards apiece. And that is all of the stats that have been input for Englewood in that game. Now, we're going to head on to our Saturday games. All right, so we had 4 games on Saturday in the 2A classification, and we're going to start with Denver West losing to Denver North 12-40, which is a bit of a tough break for the Cowboys. No box score here yet, but the Cowboys, I actually do want to see the all-time, like, what the record is for that series, because I remember seeing, I think it was Frankie Dardano, he posted on his Instagram story that is a 100-year type rivalry, so I'm interested to see what that looks like. Next up, we have Manual falling to the Grand Valley Cardinals, Grand Valley falling to Manual, 46-22. Manual has not input stats yet, but for Grand Valley, Andrew Horner went 5 for 8 for 30 yards, and then rushing-wise, we see Mason Shopner was the main dude, 109 rushing yards. Gabriel Mendoza, 51 rushing yards and a touchdown. Horner, 33 and 2 touchdowns. And then P. Johnston with 17 rush yards. Receiving, Shopner was the main dude, 21 receiving yards, and then Mendoza had 9. Tackles-wise, we see Mendoza had 10 with 2 for loss. Shopner had 8 with 3 for loss. Sion Clegg, the sophomore, he had 6 with 2 for loss, which is the same stat line as R. Terrazas. Hope I'm saying that right. And then Camden Neal also had 6 tackles. Then we see Braden Allen, P. Johnston, and Aiden Strauss each had 5. Philip Hoyt, Jay Metazabal, he had 4, and then Peyton Ferris also had 4. And then we see Jason Skeen had 3. In terms of sacks, Sion Clegg had 1, and then Mason Shopner, Peyton Ferris, Aiden Strauss, and Philip Hoyt each shared tackles with each other. Each of them is credited with half of a sack. Braden Allen had an interception for 5 yards, 2 pass deflections, and a forced fumble. Mason Shopner had a pass deflection and a forced fumble, which one of those 3 forced fumbles, the other one was by Clegg, was presumably recovered by Skeen. And then Johnston had a pass deflection. And that's really the long and short of it. Braden Allen had 2 punts for 80 yards. And Jackson Rugard, he had 2 kickoff returns for 23 yards. And Skeen had 2 punt returns for 40. All around pretty solid. Isaiah Ramirez, 2 for 2 on PATs as well. And Shopner with a conversion rush. Kent Denver, next up, we'll take down the Sterling Tigers 48-0. No stats there because these teams hate inputting stats for some reason. And then the final game of the day, we see Woodland Park picking up their first win of the season, 24-7 over the Colorado Springs Christian School Lions. with Marcus Schoenberger 10 for 16 for 147 yards and a score. He also ran for 9 yards and a touchdown. Then we also see Parker Shreve 15 rush yards and Aiden Hood 18 carries for 67 yards and a score. Then receiving-wise, Caden Lewis was the one that caught that touchdown. He had 71 receiving yards, Griffin King 49 receiving yards, and Evan Bamsberger with 27. Oh, at least 4 interceptions here for the Woodland Park Panthers here, but we also see Bamsberger had 24 punt return yards, so that's pretty solid. We see that Aiden Hood had 11 tackles, Bamsberger had 7, Ben Summerall also had 7 along with Parker Shreve. Schoenberger had 5, Griffin King also had the same mark. Wyatt Stimmitz had 4, and then Mateo Pizarro, the Manitou homie, you remember? Shout out to him, he had 3. Sack-wise, Shreve had a sack for 3 yards, and then we see, oh my goodness, we have 5 players with interceptions in this game. Stimmitz had 2 for 14 yards, Marcus Schoenberger had 1 for 12 yards, Griffin King had 1 for 11, Aiden Hood had 1 for 8, and then Bamsberger had 1, and then a pass deflection as well. Griffin King, by the way, he had 3 pass deflections. Miles Wiley, the sophomore, really impressive kid. He had 293 kickoff yards on 5 kickoffs and 3 touchbacks. Griffin King also had 5 punts for 260 yards, averaging 52 yards. Take a look at Griffin King if you're a college looking for a punter. In terms of kickoff returns, Evan Bamsberger, 2 punt returns for 24 yards. And yeah, just really solid here by the Panthers to get on the board in this game. Wiley also showing his stuff. 3 for 3 on PATs, 1 for 2 on field goal attempts, and that field goal was a 48-yarder to get in the win column this year. All around, really good job in 2A, really good slate of games, and next week is slated to be really exciting. So, I'll catch y'all probably when you hear me do the Roosevelt versus Holy Family recap, but I hope you're all well. Peace.
What is going on, everybody? Gino here with the Playmakers Corner podcast, coming at you with yet another Friday night recap. This time, Simon and I made our way out to Monument to come see a cross-class matchup between the home team Lewis Palmer Rangers and the visiting Falcon Falcons. Lewis Palmer came into this game 3-1, with their only loss coming to their crosstown rivals and the current top team in 4A, Palmer Ridge High. Outside of that game, LP has put together some nice blowouts using their signature triple option to wear down their opponents, and they are definitely a threat in 3A. On the Falcon side, they were coming into this one 2-2 with a couple nice wins over George Washington and Aurora Central, and then a couple bad losses to Fountain Fort Carson and last week to Vista Ridge. They didn't have their starting running back Gabriel McFarland at all in this game, so we knew that Falcon was going to have to lean on their dual-threat QB, Carter Thorpe, if they wanted a chance to win this one. With that in mind, let's not waste any more time and see how this game went. Let's go ahead and start it off here with the first quarter. LP would start with the ball here in this one, with number 11 Joe Nisley taking the return to the LP 35, and that's where they would start this drive. LP would start to get their running back duo of number 22 Luke DeBoer and number 24 Jade Pagano involved early, with DeBoer getting 4 yards on his first carry, and that was followed by Pagano, who took it on third down for a nice gain to give LP a first down on their own 46. Number 43 Corey Hotel on Falcon made a big tackle on second down after a short Pagano run on first, so now it's 3rd down and 5 here for Lewis Palmer. An incomplete pass on third would force a punt here for LP. A very nice punt would put Falcon all the way back to their own 11-yard line to start the drive. Falcon would immediately be charged with a false start to push them back 5, so now it's 1st and 15 from their own 6-yard line. This is where we basically saw the bulk of Falcon's game plan in just 3 plays, as their QB number 9 Carter Thorpe would go power right for a few yards, and then a couple runs up the middle out of the shotgun for small gains to force a punt. LP would call fair catch on the punt, and that starts their next drive with solid field position on their own 45-yard line. A sweep to Pagano on first was stopped for a yard, followed by a DeBoer run for no gain to make it 3rd and 9 for Lewis Palmer. They continued to roll with their game plan despite 3rd and long, and they give it to DeBoer here on the sweep as he gets them a first down on the play to the Falcon 43. On the very next play, Pagano would go ahead and take it up the middle for 22 yards to give LP a first down on the Falcon 21. Lewis Palmer would actually try a pass on second down here after Pagano run for 4 yards on first down, but it is horribly dropped to make it 3rd and 6. Drops were probably Lewis Palmer's biggest problem in this game. No worries though, as Pagano would pick up the receiver who dropped it by getting a first down on the triple option the very next play to the 13-yard line. LP would give it to Pagano on first down for a 1-yard gain, but he pushes on ahead on second down and moves the ball up to the 5-yard line. On third down, Pagano punches it in on a run up the middle to make it 7-0 after LP hits the PAT. Falcon would start on their own 23 after a decent return from number 10 Dominic Puffpath. Falcons' game plan started to get working a little bit here as Thorpe took a run up the middle for a nice gain to make it 1st and 10 from the Falcon 38. After a couple runs for no gain on first and second down and an incomplete pass on third, Thorpe would go ahead and run it again on third down and long to give Falcon another first down. They would try another pass on first, but it's incomplete, followed by a Thorpe run on second for a few yards. On third down, Thorpe drops back to pass, rolls right, lets go, and it is picked off by number 11, Joe Nisley, and he takes that to the Falcon 48-yard line. Unfortunately for Lewis Palmer, an illegal hands of the face flag on the return would bring that interception back to their own 33-yard line. DeBoer would get a first down run and push the ball up to the Falcon 47, and that would take us to the end of the first quarter. Rolling right in here into the second quarter, it's LP ball, and LP had a couple runs on first and second down to make it 3rd and 2, but Falcon would jump off sides on third to give LP a first down on the Falcon 34. That was definitely a trend in this one. What looked like a very promising drive for LP would get derailed as number 55, Braden Rick on Falcon, picks off the pass to give the ball back to the Falcons on their own 30-yard line. Falcon ran a couple of plays for a small gain, but they would give it to the speedster, number 19, Ashton Luttrell on a jet sweep, and he would get them a first down to their own 41. Thorpe took a first down run for a few yards, but things got interesting here as they started to get their freshman running back, number 2, Ethan Mangrum, involved, as he would take a third down run 19 yards down the sidelines to give Falcon a first down, now on the LP 36-yard line. On the next play, number 13, Brian Wainwright forced a fumble, but it was recovered by Falcon for no gain or loss. Number 55, Darian Zoll stopped a QB run to make it 3rd and 10, and then sacked Thorpe on the very next play to make it 4th and 12 from the LP 28-yard line. Thorpe clutched up here, however, as he found number 10, Dominic Puffpath on a pass for a first down. A holding call on 3rd and 4 pushed Falcon back 5, and the next play would be a Thorpe scramble where he absolutely trucks a kid on the play, but it won't be enough for the first down, so it's now 4th and 3. Falcon would set up to go for it here on 4th and short, but a rough delay of game call pushes them back 5, and they were forced to send out the kicking unit. The kick is up, and it is no good, as it is still 7-0 Lewis Palmer here. LP would start their next drive on their own 20. Pagano and DeBoer both got nice runs to get a first down, but LP's drop passes became a real issue on the next set of plays. Joe Nisley dropped a bubble screen that probably would have gone for a nice gain, and that was followed by the drop of the night. A beautiful Kenton Kenley pass down the sideline to a wide-open Jared Moore, but he is unable to come down with it to force a 4th down and a punt. Falcon would take the ball on their own 30 after the punt goes out of bounds to start this 2-minute drill drive. Thorpe tried to find Ashton Luttrell on first down for an incomplete pass, but those two would connect on the very next play as Luttrell goes absolutely ballistic, shedding multiple tackles, juking several defenders, and methodically using his blocks to take the ball all the way to the LP 18-yard line. On second down, Thorpe finds Dominic Puffpath, who makes an awesome jumping grab for the touchdown to make it 7-7 now after the PAT with less than a minute to go here in the first half. LP would get the ball on their own 31, but the end of the half would cut that drive short. So it is now 7-7 here at halftime. Super close game, it looks like. So now rolling into the Second half here, Falcon would start with the ball in the second half on the 20 after the touchback, and they would go 3 and out here. LP started on their own 30 after the punt. Here on first down, Pagano would start the half off hot by taking a run to the 43-yard line. Number 30, Elijah Puffpath would stop a QB option that should have been pitched on second down, and that makes it 3rd and 7. LP would give it to Pagano on consecutive carries to finally get the first down on the 50-yard line. A couple QB runs later, and it's now 3rd and 4 for LP. Falcons slipped up on the next play, jumping off sides to give LP a much-needed first down. They got the first down after Kenley got the sneak up the middle on 3rd and short. From there, none other than Jaden Pagano would get a couple of carries and eventually punch it in for his second score of the game. And he is far from being done. It's 14-7 LP now with 3:31 left in the third quarter. Falcon got the ball on the 20 after the touchback. Thorpe would take the first play of the drive, a read option, 10 yards to get a first down on the Falcon 30. They would then give it to their freshman running back, Ethan Mangrum, a couple plays in a row for a few yards to make it 3rd and 4. Number 9, Jack Harmon on Lewis Palmer would get a stop to make it 4th and 2 here. A terrible snap on 4th down goes over Thorpe's head. He tracks that down, but it is still a turnover on downs, and it is LP ball on the Falcon 18-yard line. Just an absolute gut punch for the Falcons. LP would take full advantage of this mistake as Pagano would take the first down run all the way to the 5-yard line, followed by a DeBoer run for a couple, and that was followed by a touchdown run up the middle by none other than, you guessed it, Jaden Pagano to give him that hat trick. It's 21-7 now with 25 seconds left in the third quarter. A touchback and a pass caught by Puffpath for 5 yards takes us here to the end of the third quarter. Let's roll right into the final quarter of the game here. It's still Falcon ball. Thorpe started the final quarter off with an incomplete pass and a run for a short gain to make it 4th and 4. They would, however, option to punt here rather than risk giving LP great field position again. The snap went over the punter's head, but he would eventually snag it and get the punt off after running around for a bit, and LP starts with the ball on the Falcon 44. An incomplete pass and a run for a short gain makes it 3rd and 6, but an offsides flag pushes LP up 5 to make it 3rd and 1. Pagano took that third down run for a nice gain, putting LP on the Falcon 29-yard line. That was followed by a Kenton Kenley keeper as he gets a first down on the 18-yard line here. DeBoer stepped up big time here on the next play, taking the ball to the 4-yard line for a 14-yard carry on the next play, and that would set up Pagano's 4th touchdown of the day to make it 27-7 LP. LP tried a fake field goal, but it was incomplete, so it is now 27-7 in the fourth quarter. Falcon would actually be not able to score again in this game, and 27-7 would be our final score in this one. So yeah, just some final game thoughts on this one, and then I'll get into each team specifically and their outlook on the season. So for the game, I think this game really looked like it had a chance of being a close one, with the score knotted up 7-7 at half. But Falcon just could not find a way to get the ball in the red zone outside of that 2-minute drill to end the first half. Falcon not having Gabriel McFarland really made all the difference in this one, as Lewis Palmer was able to focus in on Carter Thorpe and stop his runs. Combine that with some key penalties and mistakes on Falcon in the second half, and Falcon made it very difficult for themselves to make this game close. Lewis Palmer didn't do themselves any favors with all those drops in the pass game, but their game plan allows for them to make up for those mistakes in different ways. So for Lewis Palmer, this was a signature game for Lewis Palmer. They wore Falcon's front down with a non-stop running attack as the triple option proved to be too much for that Falcon defense. Jane Pagano and Luke DeBoer complement each other very well, and I have to think that either one of them could hold down this offense if one of them were to miss a game. It really makes for a deadly rushing attack when the defense has to be able to lock down 2 good running backs rather than just one. And then you throw that in with Kenton Kenley's solid dual threat ability, and now that's 3 dudes that can beat you with their legs. It really seemed like they nailed every short distance play, and they even have run plays for 3rd and long too. I do think though that this offense has a ceiling a bit lower than some of the teams in front of them in the rankings due to their complete and utter lack of a passing game. It's not like they don't have effective passing plays to call either. I mean, I saw with my own eyes that they had play action and some screenplays that get their receivers the ball in space, but their receivers just could not catch them that day. I don't know if it was nerves thing or if it's a common trait of this offense, but it definitely stood out to me how ineffective they were through the air. I like their outlook going forward as they have gone through the bulk of their tough games already, with their next real test being against the currently number 10 ranked Pueblo Central Wildcats on October 20th. Lewis Palmer is definitely a team to watch out for in 3A. Now let's talk about Falcon. Not the best game for the Falcons. I was left quite unimpressed with their lack of offensive creativity, as it was really just Carter Thorpe going power left and power right the entire game with a couple Ethan Mangrum runs and a couple read options sprinkled in. Not having your big power back and Gabriel McFarland completely derailed this offense's ability to push the ball forward on short downs, and they paid dearly for it. The penalties didn't help either, but not having McFarland as an option allowed for Lewis Palmer to zero in on Thorpe, and that obviously made it very difficult to move the sticks. That's not to say that I blame Thorpe or even the coaching staff for their shortcomings in that game. It's just really hard to find positives in a loss like that. I think their defense has some big guys up front that can help disrupt any team's pass game, but when you face a team like Lewis Palmer with an unrelenting pass attack, it becomes very tiring and difficult to stop them from moving the ball up. I would like to see them get the ball to Ashton Luttrell more, as he's a very dynamic player with the ball. If they can make him a threat in this offense and then get McFarland back, I can see this Falcon team making a late season run for a playoff spot. Tough games ahead, though, against Montrose, at home, luckily, Pueblo West, and Mesa Ridge, but I will be keeping a close eye on these Falcons to see how they respond the rest of the season.
Welcome back, beautiful people. And so, you might have just heard my voice for a bunch already, depending on how we're ordering this, but we are going to do a recap of Friday night's game 3A top 5 matchup between Holy Family, who we have seated at 3, and Roosevelt, who we have seated at 2, as of recording this. Actually, by the time you hear this, it'll probably be different. I'll tell you afterwards. In any case, I am so glad that I went to this game. I mean, honestly, this was the game of the year for me so far. And I felt really energized by the end of it. I mean, after this game, Johnstown is my second favorite place that I've watched a game so far while I've been working with the podcast. Only Alt really comes in ahead of this, and honestly, that's just barely. I mean, granted, nothing can beat Richardson Field in the end for me, but that accepted, this is number 2. So I'm going to start with Holy Family, their players of the game, and then I'll move on to Roosevelt and theirs, and then finally a game summary. So, starting with Holy Family. On the kickoff return, we have Monte Samaras returning the kickoff for 18 yards, followed by Dominic Gabriel running for 15, then 7, and then a first down. Rylan Cooney scrambled for 7 before a turnover on downs, following which Gabriel got a tackle, along with Dutch Vandel, who then got a pass deflection. Gabriel got 2 more before the Tigers allowed a 20-yard passing touchdown to go down 0-7 with 5:48 in the first. Samaras ran for 15 again on the return, and Gabriel immediately, and I mean immediately, got a 64-yard rushing touchdown to even the game at 7 with 5:19 on the board. Brady Anderson's kickoff was a touchback, and then an Anderson-Osborne Vandal combo shared a tackle for loss. Connor Neely got a TFL, which helped to force a punt. Cooney then threw to Jackson Grable for 4, and then to Samaras for 8. This helps get the Tigers in field goal range, with Oliver Hansen being able to put the field goal in to put Holy Family up 10-7 with 2 minutes left in the first quarter. Hansen's kickoff was a touchback, and then Santiago Guerrero ended up getting a tackle to end the first quarter. In the second, Holy Family's defense almost gave up a lot of yardage, but they ended up being saved by penalties on the Roosevelt side of the ball. Joseph Eitzen, or Itten, I'll say Eitzen, tripped up a runner to save a touchdown. His efforts ended up being moot due to a touchdown on the very next play, which made it 10-13 with 10:13 on the clock. Weird coincidence aside, Gabriel's return was for 25 yards, and then Cooney threw to Anderson for 12. After a few shorter runs, Cooney threw to Osborne for 7 before Gabriel ran in a tutty, which Hansen nailed the PAT for to go up 17-13 with 6:31 on the clock. Cole Cusack and Josh Thiara each got tackles before Vandale got another, and his second pass deflection of the night. Neely, Braden Bach, and Abram Moore shared a takedown, and then the Tigers allowed another touchdown to make it 17-20 with 44 seconds left. Samaras ran for 10, and then Holy Family allowed a 10-yard sack. After a timeout with 32 seconds, Cooney would throw to Ashton Erickson for 13, and then to Gabriel for 12. The Tigers took another timeout with 12 seconds left, and eventually went for a field goal attempt, which doinked off of the uprights to end the half. Entering the third quarter, after Hansen's kickoff went for about 45, Gabriel and Moore got a couple of tackles. Guerrero and Cusack shared a bring down, and Neely got another pass deflection. After some solid defense, though, Roosevelt did score again, putting Holy Family down 17-27 with 4:17 in the quarter. Gabriel returned the kickoff for 57 yards, which put the Tigers in amazing field position, and then ran for 15 yards in 3 plays. However, Holy Family then allowed back-to-back sacks, which resulted in 3rd and 21. However, this was almost redeemed when Cooney threw to Samaras for 14, making it 4th and 4. The Tigers were going for it, but a false start made it so that Hansen would have to attempt a field goal, which was good, making it 20-27 with 59 seconds left. Cusack and Landon Peters shared the tackle on the return, which I believe forced a fumble, and then Mark Mullendor recovered it. Gabriel ended up running for 5 to end the third, and in the fourth, after an illegal motion penalty, Cooney threw to Samaras for 17, and then ran for 3 yards to punch in a touchdown. And after the PAT did fall short, I believe, it made it 26-27 for Holy Family with a little over 10 minutes left in the fourth. Samaras got a tackle on the kickoff return, and then Bach got a couple to bring it back. Eitzen brought a man down to the bear hug style wrap, and then Cusack and Neely each got a couple of their own. This helped the Tigers to force 4th and 1 on their own 11-yard line, but after they took a timeout with 1:56, they allowed a touchdown to go with about 1:52 left on the clock to go down 26-34. And I know there are some time gaps here, but this was genuinely like a really, both a fast game in terms of how long it was going and a lot of short gains here. So after a blindside block penalty, the pair of Cooney and Grabble repeated for 9, but then Cooney threw an interception on the 25-yard line, which basically ended the game, because that was only with about 45 seconds left. And so ultimately, solid game for Holy Family, just a couple of critical missteps in the wrong moment. But on to the playmakers of the game. We're gonna start with our defensive playmaker of the game, Dutch Vandale. And so, while Vandale didn't have the biggest statistical impact, he was very hard to ignore. He got a few pass deflections and tackles, but the 6'1 junior's frame made him really hard to get past offensively by the looks of it. It felt like his arms stretched 10 feet at times, and Roosevelt had to make sure they avoided his area of the field. Here's Vandale on his impact in this critical matchup.
So tonight you got your hand up, you were able to get a couple of pass deflections, you were getting a bunch of tackles in the backfield, or not in the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
When you're looking at an elite offensive team, what were you looking for to be able to get those looks, to be able to get those stops?
Well, so the biggest key on being an outside linebacker is you always got to read the lineman. In my case, I'm reading a guard. So if a guard pulls up into a pass block, they're standing straight up. I drop back and I'm dropping to a hook curl, and I sit there and I wait, and it's almost like cherry picking. You just wait to see the ball, but I mean, then you got to wait and see if the lineman, he's going forward on a run block, because then you crash in, and then and as far as my position as an outside linebacker, you want to set an edge, and then with that edge, you make a wall, and then you keep the play inside from getting out.
And obviously, you guys are two of the top 4 teams in the entire classification, and it's honestly highly likely that this is going to be a rematch in the playoffs. So when you're looking forward to the rest of the season, to a hopefully deep playoff push, what are you going to be doing to make sure that your guys are focused, and if there is a rematch, to be able to get the next dub?
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to keep on watching film. We're going to show up every day to practice, bringing it, and we're going to keep that mindset that we're going to make it. We're going to get to state championship, and we're going to win it. And we've had that hunger all year. We've been waiting, and everyone's doubted us the entire year. No one's believed in us. And after Broomfield week 2, I think people started to believe in us, and this has been building us up. And the more we build each other up and people build us up, the higher we could get and farther.
Very well said, Dutch. And so, yeah, all around, I think that as a linebacker, Dutch made his presence known. Now, onto the offensive playmaker of the game. For the Tigers, we have Rylan Cooney, who had a very interesting night, but a highly impactful one on offense. So when he was cooking like Gordon Ramsay out there. He ended the night 15 for 20 with 183 yards, along with a rushing touchdown. And when Rylan's able to perform at that level, this team can win any game against anybody. And they're going to need him to perform at that level if Holy Family wants to win a state championship. Finally, we have the playmaker of the game for the Holy Family Tigers, who was Dominic Gabriel. Gabriel, he had himself a hell of a night. He was an absolute beast on both sides of the ball. He had 147 rush yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 28 receiving yards, 81 kick return yards, and 10 tackles in total. And if Holy Family had won this game, I think that he would be a Playmaker of the Week candidate. Here is Dominic himself to discuss this matchup and how it went for them.
Looking at tonight's game, you were a two-way beast, getting tackles all over on D, but you ripped off that 80-yarder, which was absolutely insane. And so when you're looking at being able to upkeep your body for that type of high-level play in one of the top 4 teams in this classification, what do you do to make sure that you're in the right state of mind and your body's all good for that?
I'm going to be completely honest. Without my team, I couldn't be in the shape that I'm in. We push each other every day, constantly, and everything we do. Like, we'll play cornhole, and it'll be competitive as hell. And we hold each other accountable. So, honestly, I'm not anything without them. So, yeah.
And that teamwork and cohesiveness is really a large part of what makes you guys one of the most formidable threats, like, in the entire state. So what do you say to all the skeptics out there that think that 3A teams can't fall in against 4A teams, 5A teams? Or
we already proved them wrong once this season. That's exactly it.
Fair enough.
I mean, 3A, as you can see, man, like, we're one of the deepest classifications there is. And I think we're the hardest working class as well, because we know that we're the underdog in everything that we do.
Finally, when you're looking in a next week, you're hoping to continue that push to be able to make a deep playoff run. How is the team feeling? Like, and outside of film, what are you going to be doing to make sure that you're staying on the right track for a deep run?
Lifting harder, practicing harder, studying film. Anything that there is that we do, we just got to keep doing what we're doing and do it even better than we were before. 1% better each day.
Thank you so much, Dominic. And I think a lot of what he said there about having that cohesive team, having those guys who have your back 100% of the time, it's really important, because you don't hear about a championship team where the guys aren't friends, or at the very least get along. And yeah, what he said there rings true 150%. And all around, that's what makes Holy Family such a big threat. A couple of balls getting caught and a couple less penalties, and all of a sudden Holy Family wins this game, and they're the number one team in the class. It was a very, very close game, so we could have seen it go the other way. Which brings us to the other way, who are the Roosevelt Rough Riders. So, on to their recap. The home team did win the coin toss, and they ended up electing to defer. Sean Balch's kickoff went 55 yards, and then Joey Brake got a tackle. Julian Lara brought down a man, followed by Tristan Montanez, Carter Harmon, Milo Pascal, and Kason Lopez, which helped to force a turnover on downs. Xavier Ramirez then ran for 5 yards in consecutive plays, and then 19 in 2 downs. Bronco Hartson threw to Brake for a 20-yard touchdown, which helped put Roosevelt up 7-0 6 minutes into the first. Almost immediately, the Rough Riders then allowed a 60-yard touchdown, so then it was tied at 7 with 5:18 on the clock. After going 3 and out, Bronco punted for 35, followed by his almost sharing a sack with Cash Gartrell. And then Evan Hayes got a tackle, which helped to force a field goal attempt, which put Roosevelt down 7-10 with about 2 minutes left in the first. After a false start, Hartson threw to Brake once again for 45 yards, a catch in the basket on the right sideline from the left hash mark at that, to end the first. After holding called back a 25-yard gain, Ramirez ran for 4, and then Hartson threw to Noah Lucero for 35, and then once again to Landon McCann for a touchdown. The PAT was off, but Roosevelt still led 13-10 with 10:13 on the clock. Yay for palindromes, but then right back on defense, Noel Sanchez clotheslined a runner for a tackle, and then tackles by Trevor Karabesh and Jax Armstrong forced 4th and 5. However, this did not result in a turnover, but in a rushing touchdown for Holy Family, which put Roosevelt down 13-17 with 6:31. Hartson threw to Ramirez for 15, and then for 13 to Guntle. Ramirez had an elusive 13 yards, and then for 7 more. After 4th and 3, Roosevelt took a timeout with 1:13 on the clock, after which Ramirez converted a first down. He then put in a touchdown, which Balt hit the PAT for to make it 20-17 with 44 seconds left on the board. Balch's squib kick went 30 yards, and then Guntle got a sack. After an illegal helmet contact penalty, Hartson got a tackle, which helped to force a field goal attempt, which doinked off of the pole to end the half. To start the second half, Xavier Ramirez ran for 25 on the kickoff return, and then Hartson ran for 13 across 2 downs. Ramirez carried for 12, and then Hartson did the same for 3 and a first down. Hartson then threw to Karabench for what was almost inches away from being a touchdown, but Ramirez punched it in on the very next play to make it a 27-17 game with 4:17 on the clock. Yes, I know I just started the third quarter recap, and we're already at 4:17. It was a very weird game. Then, Lara and Josiah Ramirez each got a tackle, followed by Harmon getting a sack. This was followed by Hartson also getting one, which really pumped up the crowd in Johnstown. However, Hartson then got a cramp, which did take him out for a couple of downs. Aiden Henry got a tackle, which helped force 4th and 9, along with the field goal attempt, which made it 27-20 with 59 seconds left in the third. Lucero returned the kickoff for 4, and then Guntle did the same for the same difference. However, the quarter ended on a bad note for Roosevelt with a fumble. The fourth quarter ended up starting with Karabench getting a tackle, followed by Henry and Lopez sharing a sack. After Harmon was shortly taken out for an injury, Roosevelt did allow a touchdown on the ground, which narrowed a gap to 27-26 with a little over 10 minutes left in the game, 10:02 to be exact. Lucero returned to the kickoff for 5, and then Guntel ran for 15, followed by Ramirez going for the same distance. Hartson threw to Guntel for 15 more, but Holding ended up bringing it back. Hartson ended up pulling a SpongeBob and said, "Want to see me do it again?" and threw to Karabench for 20. On 4th and 1, Roosevelt ended up taking a timeout with 3:02 left in this game. And then Ramirez ended up taking that and converting it. And before running a couple of more downs, Ramirez ended up punching in a touchdown. Balch's PAT was good, cushioning Roosevelt's lead at 34-26 with 1:55 in the game. However, it was not yet sealed, so Sanchez had to get a tackle, and after the clock had to be reset multiple times, Hayes got one of his own. And then the game was sealed by Karabench when he got an interception at about his own 25 with 40-ish seconds left on the clock to seal the deal for the Rough Riders. Now onto our defensive playmakers of the game for the Roosevelt Rough Riders. First, we're going to stop with our defensive playmaker of the game, Carter Harmon, who was a really, really valuable piece for this defense, as he was the spear point on this night's D-line for Roosevelt. A lot of the best looks that the Rough Riders had on defense were off of the pressure that Harmon was able to create. Further, I think he did start on the offensive line, so he was also a big part in making sure that Bronco Hartson didn't get much pressure. But a lot of the pressure that was created for Holy Family was off of Harmon. He had a sack, a hurry, and it felt like the defense could not stop him. And so here is Carter with his thoughts on tonight's matchup.
When you're looking at today's game, you were really one of the main spearheads when it came to breaking through the offensive line and getting to the quarterback. So what were you looking at in terms of how the offensive line for Holy Family was scheming to be able to get that type of pressure?
Well, all I'm saying is, so the right guard on my side he was really slow off the ball, so I would just jump the ball, catch their snap count, just get off the ball fast, and just got through the line like that. So and then obviously he changed his ways a little bit, so I had to switch it up. But at the beginning of the game, that's how I came out.
Fair enough. And when we're looking at, this was one of the most anticipated matchups of the season across all classifications, and it lived up to the hype. But heading forward, how are you going to be able to continue spearheading that line in your title defense?
We just watching film, paying attention, and just coming out and working hard in practice, man. Like, it's all it is to it. If we just work hard, it'll happen.
Now, I'm not sure exactly what it was with the defensive playmakers of the game this week giving really good detailed explanations, but I'm very appreciative of it because it allows average people to understand more what's going on in these types of games. Next up, we're going to look at our offensive playmaker of the game on the other side of the ball, which is Xavier Ramirez. Now, X, if you're listening, please know this was a really tough decision that came down to like the last couple of minutes of the game. But he was one of the 3 best players in this matchup. He had 163 rushing yards, 23 receiving yards, 3 tutties, and the ability to charge through or around almost anyone that was in his way. X's impact cannot be understated in this game, and he really provides space for his team to operate around him because every time he touches the ball, he's a guaranteed 5 yards. And he is a really valuable piece to have on this Roosevelt team. And finally, we have our playmaker of the game overall, and somebody that I'm going to recommend to Cody as a Playmaker of the Week candidate, Bronco Hartson, who could not be stopped on either side of the ball. The more successful of the Colorado football Broncos this week, rip to the Denver Broncos, Bronco Hartson had 194 pass yards, 2 passing tutties, 36 rushing yards, 2 sacks, a handful of tackles, and was the heartbeat of this team. He went down with a cramp in the second half, and Holy Family ended up getting some good progress. But the second he came back in, he was able to help force a turnover on downs. Broncos' performance, this one, was one of the better that I have seen live, and honestly, I can't wait to watch him again later this season. So here are his thoughts on the season ahead.
You were playing both ways. You were playing effectively. You got that sack. You got a bunch of tackles. You got a couple of tutties. When you're what is your routine to be able to keep your body at the place where you're able to perform at such a high level on both sides of the ball?
I'm gonna give a lot of my credit to wrestling. I've been in positions. Wrestling is like no other sport, man. It just takes so much cardio, and I know what it's like to have to push when you're in situations like that. I know the team needed me to have an impact on both sides of the ball, so I just kept reminding myself of that. Just want to know every single play.
And the top 4 in 3A is the most competitive 4 teams across any classification this year. So when you're looking at, you're potentially going to rematch with Holy Family. You have Lutheran, you have Green Mountain, all teams with really strong offenses, really strong defenses. What's your mental approach to figuring out the rest of the season and defending your title?
We 100% we take it one game at a time. I'll take us over anybody in 1 week of preparation and a game Friday night or Saturday, whatever it may be. We'll watch our film, we'll get it right. We practice hard every single day, and I got a lot of faith in this team and the coaches.
And you've got an offer from Chadron State, potentially go and join Tucker. So you got any other offers on the table that you're looking at? Or
the other 3 offers I have is Colorado School of Mines, South Dakota School of Mines, and Western. So those are my 4 right now. All great schools, all have great attributes about them.
Thank you very much, Bronco. It was a pleasure meeting you in person finally. And whatever school ends up having you will be lucky. Honestly, any school that ends up with any of the 6 guys that I've talked about today will be lucky. But in terms of this game, time for our summary, which, honestly, this game was absolutely insane. It was so back and forth. The student sections, both of them were really getting into it. It felt like a real community effort to get this win. And honestly, the gap between these top 4 teams in the 3A classification is insane. And it's insane in the fact that 1 or 2 bad plays separates these teams playing each other from a win and a loss. Holy Family, for me, it felt like when they're in their groove, they're almost unstoppable. I think that the only teams that could stop an on-fire Holy Family are the top 10 in 5A. And even then, sometimes you kind of wonder about some of those 8 through 15 seeds. But Roosevelt, it felt like, was a little bit more consistent on this particular night. Holy Family felt a bit hot and cold, but Roosevelt was just keeping her steady, running the offense through those guaranteed 5 yards in Xavier, that almost guaranteed completion in Bronco. And it just felt like that was a team that made all the right plays. Holy Family very easily could have won this one, depending on how a couple of steps even had changed. So you play this one. I do think that Roosevelt wins this if they play how they did more often than not, but it's only 53 to 47% of the time, So I'm just psyched that I got to watch this in person and that I was able to see both of these teams. And so heading forward for these squads, they're finally going to hit their league schedules, which both of these league schedules are no joke. So looking at Holy Family first, next week they're going to be facing Grady Forsyth and the Conifer Lobos. Then they'll be facing they're going to be facing Riken Doggard's Lutheran Lions, then Jack Easterly's Northfield Nighthawks. Then they have an easier stretch to close the season against Fort Morgan, Lincoln, and Kennedy. So I expect them to at least go, worst case scenario, go 4-1 for the rest of this, or not 4-1. Going 4-2 for the rest of the season. Best case scenario, I could even see them going undefeated the rest of the year. The only really losable games I see here are Lutheran and Northfield. And this one will be and that game against Northfield will be to see if they truly belong in the top 5, or hell, even in the top 4, like the Chassis Selection and Seating Index does. On to Roosevelt. They'll be facing Resurrection Christian next week in Loveland, so not too far of a drive. Res Christian is coming off of a big win in Orlando, so we're going to see what the Lions or Cougars, I'm honestly forgetting. Oh yeah, Cougars. What the Res Christian Cougars are looking like for league play in one of the tougher leagues in the state. Because the very next week, they're going to be facing Northridge. The Grizzlies are a team that has vastly surprised me, so it'll be interesting to see what the Rough Riders are able to do against the Greeley squad. Then they have Severance in Severance against the Hoffman brothers, and while Severance is having a bit of a tough season, I can see a world where they make an upset and they're able to spoil a couple of teams' playoff chances, so we'll see how the Silver Knights do against the Rough Riders. Then Roosevelt will be playing Thompson Valley, where that is going to be interesting considering Thompson Valley did lose to Riverdale Ridge the other night, but they should still be a tough squad. And then they close it out with an easy one against Mountain View. That'll be one to pad a couple of stats if you're asking me. So, worst case scenario, I think Roosevelt walks out of this 3-2. I don't see them losing to... worst case scenario, they lose to either Res, Northridge, or Thompson Valley. Maybe Severance, depending on how that goes. And then best case scenario, this is a 5-0 stretch for the rest of the season. But ultimately, that is all from me today on this episode of the Playmakers Corner podcast. I've been Gideon Egner, and I hope that all of you are having a great day. Make sure you drink your water, eat your goodies, and stay safe, don't die, don't get sick, because COVID's coming back around. And I'll talk to you all soon. Peace.
And just when you thought they finally got rid of me, here I am in the fifth segment, actually, of this episode 300 of the Playmakers Corner podcast. I am your showrunner, Cody Stauffer. We've kind of just been clipping this together piece by piece here. And thank you to Gideon and Gino for those recaps of the games that they attended. And now you get stuck with me for probably the next, at least hour, probably, of stuff here. But I got some good stuff for you. We got the 3A recap here first, and then we're going to also talk about a game that Simon and I went to right after this, and a word from our sponsor. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the 3A recap here, and let's go ahead and run down this list here. George Washington, a.k.a. G-Dub, gets the dub over Aurora Central 26-6 to start off Thursday's games and move to 3-1 on the season with only one non-league game left. Kennedy tops Littleton 42-27, and that is thanks in huge part to Isaias Tomita, who had 417 passing yards, did not list how many touchdowns, but probably at least had 4 or 5. In other 3A news, one of the biggest surprises in all of 3A this season is Skyview, who is now 45-0 in that game against Sierra, and on the season 4-0. They are undefeated. The defense forced 3 interceptions, with Singleton getting 2 of those interceptions and a fumble recovery as well. And Carlos Correa was one of 5 Wolverines to score in the blowout win. Skyview putting together a pretty strong case for being a playoff team. In Discovery Canyon's clobbering of Pueblo Centennial, 4 different players ran for scores as Disco beat the Bulldogs 53-7. Resurrection Christian beat up on St. John's from South Carolina 43-6 and maintained their spot in our power rankings. And I believe that was all of the Thursday games, but we got some serious meat here in the Friday games, starting off with Glenwood, who drops their 3rd in a row to plummet to 500. Their playoff hopes are dwindling and slipping through their grasp after losing 56-14 to Grand Junction Central. Northridge, however, remains undefeated after beating Rangeview for the 2nd year in a row with a perfectly balanced 30 rushes and 30 passes with 2 scores in each style and a 31-21 win. It still just kind of blows my mind that they ran exactly 30 pass plays as well as 30 run plays and scored 2 touchdowns in each variety. The kicker also hitting all of his kicks today in this game, as Northridge actually beats Rangeview for the second year in a row. And then also shout out junior AJ Evans, who is flying all over the field with 14 tackles in this 10-point win. Frederick, they have now won their second one in a row here after beating Fort Morgan 30-19 on the road. And Gavin Ishmael is sensational, throwing 22 of 33 for 231 yards and 4 scores while securing in 1 on his feet for a score. So 5 total touchdowns in that win for Gavin Ishmael, the sensation. Gavin Sensational Ishmael. There's got to be some kind of rhyme there. And then Burke Eisman caught 2 touchdowns for the Warriors, and then Palma led in receptions with 7. I was going to say his first name, but I am too afraid of butchering it beyond recognition. So we're not going to do that this time around, especially because I know that I'll hear about it from Coach V. Anyways, I digress here. Let's go back into the recaps here. Pueblo South facing off against East. If you recall from our recap last year, one of our most watched TikToks and one of our biggest recaps here, this game actually ended early because tensions in the stands and on the fields were too high last year. However, Pueblo South will get the get back this year behind Caden Herrera's performance, throwing for 247 yards. While he did throw 2 touchdowns and 2 picks, Pueblo South does beat Pueblo East this year. And the Colts defense coming up huge. They were absolutely relentless in the pass game, intercepting 5 passes, and Damian Cordova leading the pack with 2 here. Pueblo South, like I said, getting a win after losing to Pueblo East in the 2022 season. Lincoln got shut out by Inglewood 43-0. You probably heard the Inglewood stats in Gideon's segment, and if you didn't, go listen to that because they're obviously the ones who scored points in this game. Now, in a big 3A matchup that I think will have some heavy playoff implications and seeding implications, the Durango Demons get a quality win over Meade with a steady offense. Tyler Harms at quarterback goes 14 of 18, throwing for a score and running for another one on the ground. And then Jackson Fancher runs for 129 and a pair of scores. Julian Rodriguez had a pick with 45 yards of return, being one of 2 forced turnovers for the Demons in this game. And Meade, desperate here, 1-3, and Green Mountain up next. Arguably a must-win game if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. Very difficult schedule this year. Their league is significantly improved from what it was last year, and the Mavs are fighting an uphill battle. They've been in plenty of close games, but they have not pulled one out yet against one of these more quality teams. Sand Creek actually led TCA 24-21 entering half before the game got away from them, and they eventually end up losing 32-51. As noted by Gideon, Roosevelt did beat Holy Family in a top 5 matchup at home 34-26. It is worth mentioning that in a losing effort, Dominic Gabriel still ran for 147 yards and 2 scores for Holy Family, but there were just so many Rough Riders putting on great performances. You had 4 different Rough Riders who had a pair of TFLs with freshman Kason Lopez, junior number 67 Carter Harmon, Jace Gunty, and then Bronco Hartson, who had 2 TFLs, and along with, I want to say Carter had 1.5 sacks. Bronco, on the offensive side of the ball, goes 11 for 15 for 194 yards and 2 scores. Xavier Ramirez does his thing as well, rushing for 3 touchdowns on 164 yards and 28 carries. This is a huge win for Roosevelt to win my number 1 spot, and stay tuned for the rest of our thoughts on Simon's Power Rankings later, and it gives Holy Family some things to focus on moving forward. So both of those games, as far as Durango Meade and Holy Family Roosevelt, huge games for potential playoff teams and an early look at what the 3A playoffs could potentially look like heading forward. Now, Summit rides a 21-0 first half into a win over Wheat Ridge 32-14, but it is noticeable that Bennett Wilkes was still successful, catching 7 passes for 109 yards and a score in the Farmers' losing effort. Severance finally gets another W, beating Evergreen 41-8. You did have the Cougar defenders of Haddad and Morrow, who both had double-digit tackles, and James Morrow doing so as a freshman. but that was not enough as the Hoffman brothers connect for 2 touchdowns through the air, and then Jaden finds Pater with his legs one more time. Ian Pennick had 172 yards and 2 scores, and then sophomore Ethan Shears did find the end zone as well with a pretty ludicrous 36 yards per carry for the Knights. In another shakeup here, Riverdale Ridge throws a wrench in the rankings and beats Thompson Valley 28-14. This game was definitely a grind for both teams, with neither averaging a ton of yards per play. But for Riverdale, Marcus McFadden caught 10 passes for 159 yards and a score, while also having the longest play of the game with a 61-yard receiving touchdown and a rushing score as well. McKinley Jones for Riverdale ran for 2 scores, and this puts Thompson Valley at a very weird spot before league brings the heat. They were flying high off of a win over Loveland before Riverdale came in and won this game. Both these teams receiving mixed reviews in our power rankings, but I am very excited to potentially see these teams heading forward. Palisade on the 3A level lost to 4A Golden 12-27, but not without Keaton Everett running for 154 yards and throwing a touchdown to a pick. And then sophomore Tristan Brinton also forced 2 fumbles and recovered 3, as the Bulldogs youth is starting to show promise at this point of the year and turn a corner. This is probably not Palisade's year this year, but I could see them becoming competitive again next season. Michael Montoya and Amari Brown both run for over 100 yards and a score when the Wildcats top Pueblo County 43-20. And in some very interesting news, Pueblo Central here, 4-1 heading into league, their only loss being to a very quality 4A Heritage team. And I think that they're in for a very interesting race for the league crown. That league crown could involve Lewis Palmer, who did beat Falcon 27-7. The Rangers are also 4-1, with their only loss being to another 4A juggernaut in Palmer Ridge. Listen to Gino's full recap to hear all about the Rangers' performance in that game. Northfield, another ranked team for us, wins 62-0 over Adams City to remain undefeated. Niwot beats Eagle Valley 29-15 with a huge effort from senior Chad Wolf. He ran for 2 scores and passed for another in an efficient performance. Eagle Valley, they recovered a fumble and blocked a punt, but just couldn't get enough from their offense to keep up in this game. Lou High loses their first game of the season, hitting a Lou low to Montrose, but they were only down by 9 entering half, but just got grinded out down the stretch, with the Red Hawks scoring 14 in the 4th quarter to put it away. Now, on Saturday, there were only 2 3A teams competing. One of those was Frankie Dardano's Denver North Vikings, and on the heels of his 3 passing and 1 rushing score, they helped get a directional dual W over Denver West. Now, I do want to say that Elijah Romero for the Vikings had a fantastic 4 tackle for loss performance, where Denver North held West's offense in check, but North here has a huge showdown with undefeated Skyview that looms large as they play serious playoff teams and probably need to go at least 500 in their next 4-game stretch to have a chance at the postseason. And the last 3A game of last weekend was Canyon City against Harrison. Canyon City explodes for a season-high 54 points in their win over Harrison, including 436 rushing yards on 70. You heard that correctly. 70 rush attempts in this wild game. Harms picking up 153, a Damage picking up 98, and Reddick picking up 84. Everyone was eating on Saturday for Canyon City as they get the dub over Harrison. Harrison's backfield wasn't shabby themselves, rushing for 244 yards, led by Maurice Martin's 111 and Gulon Kraft's 91. Kraft Jr. scoring twice. And then Darian Martin had a kickoff return for a touchdown, but that was not enough for Harrison as they fall to 0-4 on the season, and Canyon City is now 2-3. So, start to pay attention. Some teams are going to start transitioning into league play heading down the stretch, which is going to be huge for talking postseason hopes. And, as the postseason gets a little bit closer, we're going to keep an eye on these records and big games between teams for playoff seeding or playoff qualification. That'll do it for my 3A recap. We're going to have a word from our sponsor before going to their stomping grounds in Parker for my 4A game recap. Obviously, you want a trainer who can make you stronger and faster with the work you put in, but what about a trainer who can help you rehab and recover like the pros? Look no further than Junkyard Training, that not only offers specific strength and speed training, but also offers a plethora of recovery and rehab techniques like cryo, cupping, recovery boots, and so much more. Learn more today by visiting junkyardtraining.net or call 303-521-7594. Once again, visit junkyardtraining.net or call 303-521-7594 and get started today. And like I said, we were in Junkyard's backyard, one might say, for the Palmer Ridge Ponderosa game here. Let's go ahead and jump into it. This game got off to a really wild start because Palmer Ridge from their own 29 had a false start, and then there was an absolute hammer dropped by number 12, Carson Keach, to force a fumble, and then Cole Barnes recovered it, giving the Mustangs the ball on, about the 26 going in. They had a few short runs and an incompletion, and on 4th and 7, they went for a field goal, which was up and good, giving Pondo a lead with 10 minutes and 15 seconds left in the first. Now, after a big return for the Bears, they start at their 47-yard line, and after a run and then a keeper, there's 4 Mustangs that are waiting on Derek Hester. You could tell that the Mustangs are going to have a heavy key on Derek and the quarterback in this game. Palmer Ridge will open it up here with a pass, though. They pass right and pick up a first down. They then take a deep shot left, but once again, Carson Keach is there to get a pass deflection and keep Palmer Ridge waiting, but just barely. Because after a short run and a keeper, they're set up with 4th and just inches here. They try a QB sneak, but unfortunately, they come up short. There's a great play by the Mustangs down low to just stall out this center and guard, pushing it, and the chains are brought out to confirm the turnover on downs. Now, Pondo, they will start from their own 28-yard line, and now with a lot of field to go, we'll see what they can do. They hand off to Sean Davis, who picks up 6, but after a false start and 2 incompletions, it is now 4th and 9, and I think it's worth mentioning that Max Mervin, the usual wide receiver, is in at quarterback to start this game, and so obviously no healthy Price, and that makes this game a little bit, it definitely changes the dynamic of this game for sure. But Palmer Ridge, they'll be on their own 35-yard line. They'll start off with a fake jet sweep keeper that picks up 5 yards. They then throw a quick pass left to number 99, TJ Mabe here, who picks up a first down to the 48-yard line. After a handoff left to number 3 that picks up 7 yards, Holden Wright, there's another hard hit from Carson Keach, but that won't slow down this Palmer Ridge drive, as on the very next play, they take a big shot to Jimmer Wire here, who puts them inside the 5-yard line. Palmer Ridge, they call hurry up, and they get quickly up to the line of scrimmage, and they hand off to Holden Wright, who punches it in for the score. And after the PAT, they're up 7-3 with 4 minutes and a second left in the first quarter. Now, Pondo, they're on their own 20-yard line. They did not show the ability to drive down the field on the last drive. Let's see what adjustments they make here. And they start off with nothing on the first play, but then after a screen pass for 9 yards, they have a nice setup for a QB sneak that picks up a first down. They try to run a reverse here, but Jet Ziegler sees right through it and is one of a pack of Bears making a tackle for loss before there is a handoff to Sean Davis again that sets up 3rd and 3. There is a read option, and Max Mervin picks up the first down to the 50-yard line. Number 99 for Palmer Ridge, while on offense is making catches, he makes a tackle for loss on this run. And after back-to-back quarterback draws from the Mustangs, it is 4th and 1 to end the first. Once again, Palmer Ridge is leading 7-3, but the Mustangs are driving here, and to start the second quarter, they call a QB sneak that picks up a first down. After there is a quick pass to Dylan Carsteeder here, there is, it sets up second down here, or actually sets up first down. My apologies here, from the 32-yard line. I also just want to shout out here, number 55 for Ponderosa had great pass protection on this play and slid very well to, help keep this drive alive. Number 55, at least according to the roster, is Owen Peterson. I digress just a little bit here, but it doesn't matter because there's an overthrow and then a loss on a run, and after another incompletion, it is 4th and 10, and Ponderosa will kick another field goal here to force the score to be 6-7 with 10 minutes and 6 seconds left in the second quarter. Now, Palmer Ridge, they have a handoff here that picks up about 4 yards, and then another handoff to Gabe Klein, who kind of zigs and zags in the middle of the field and picks up a first down. After there is a couple of losses here due to penalties and missed blocks here, ultimately the Bears will punt on 4th and 16. Ponderosa ends up with a really weird loose ball here, and Aurelio Marchial tries to recover the play and throws a really bad interception that is picked off by Jimmer Wire here, who returns it all the way to the 29-yard line. Now, Palmer Ridge smells blood in the water. Will they capitalize with a score and make this an 8-point game? Well, let's see, because after they first play, there's a face mask that pushes them into the red zone. There's then a pass right to 99 and a run for a first. But then after that, this Ponderosa defense starts to really tighten up, especially thanks to Blake here, who had himself a very solid game, 11 tackles, 2 for loss on the night. But Blake Branham here has a great stop on first down. There's also a pass to the right that is broken up by Bennett Malone on the next play, and this forces Palmer Ridge into a tough spot here. And they take a timeout with 5:22 left in the first half. They run a keeper, but they're going to be flagged anyway and have the ball on the 11-yard line. There is another keeper that they call here, this time being filled by number 19, Caden Miller, the sophomore. That doesn't even matter because there's another penalty on Palmer Ridge that pushes them to the 22. They pass to the right, but this time there's a face mask on Ponderosa, and now they're on the 6-yard line, and it's 3rd down, and this drive is taking forever as Palmer Ridge takes a timeout with 4:16, and Ponderosa responds after they line up with a timeout of themselves. As Coach V said during this moment, quote, "Some might say this is a chess match," end quote. Also, let me know how my Coach V impersonation was in our poll on Spotify. But anyways, Palmer Ridge, they end up running a reverse, and they lose yards on it, and they kick a field goal to go up 10-6 with 3:39 left in the half. Now, they are back on offense here, Ponderosa that is, and they pick up 8 yards of gains here on their drive from Dylan Carstetter here, and that sets up a very manageable first down for Mervin to pick up running right. Now, there's a lot of open field in front of him, but I do want to compliment the Bear on this play, number 33, who's not listed here, but I'm pretty sure made the stop as there is plenty of green to be had, but he makes a great open field tackle. They then have a run for 4 and a pass to 4 for a first down on an out route. Mervin then tries to take a shot, but a tip drill interception by Wright ends up in Palmer Ridge's hands, and they get a great return. A couple of penalties are called, but Palmer Ridge will start in Pondo territory. They start off with a handoff that gets them all the way to the 35, and then another handoff right after that to number 23, Avier Elvira, I want to say is the junior tailback's name, who goes to the 27-yard line. After a quick throw to 6, picks up 8 yards. There's a minute 28 on the clock, and a keeper to Hester picks up a first down to the 11. 58 and 72 do a great job opening up a great running lane, and 99 gets just enough of the defender for number 23, Avier Elvira, to scooch in for the score, And after the PAT, it is 17-6 with a minute 11 in the first half. And Ponderosa would just run out the clock to end the half down 6-17, knowing that they would get the ball to start the half. Now, when they come out at halftime, it's very interesting because Max Mervin, like we said, he's a wide receiver that we've covered since his freshman year here. He's in his junior year, and they started off with him at quarterback, and he did not have a ton of success throwing the football on the night, 4 of 11, right? So they are going to roll out in the second half the former Cherry Creek starter, Aurelio here, who had the really weird interception on the botch snap, but they're going to try and get some stability and consistency here from somebody who's more of a specialized quarterback. Now, they come in and zip it to the right for a gain of 7. And after a handoff that loses a few yards, it is 3rd and 7. Aurelio passes near the boundary to number 2 for a first down. But then after a pitch and a couple of incomplete passes and a drop, the Mustangs are going to have to punt anyway. Palmer Ridge would start from their own 27 on their drive and have a pass left that is a screen for a first down. But then after a false start, they move backwards, and then the Ponderosa defense jumps on this opportunity as Riker Thompson and Amari Wade both fill a gap very quickly on the following play. Hester then pumps and keeps for a gain of 11, and after they hand off to Holden Wright narrowly picks up a first down to the 49-yard line. Hester keeps for 9, shaking off a big attempt at a hit, and on 2nd and 1, they run right, but a face mask on the offense is actually going to push back Palmer Ridge on 2nd and 12, and after another false start, they end up losing out on this drive and will punt after a short run. Now, on the opening play of this drive, they're looking for a big play here, and they find it as Aurelio winds up and finds Dylan Carsteeder deep to flip the field and be on the 33-yard line going in. After a quick run is stuffed, they throw a quick bubble screen left to Mervin, who runs all the way to the 11-yard line and literally almost runs over and kills me, but luckily my cat-like reflexes got me out of the way just in time before Simon had to do this recap by himself with my notes. Anyways, they have a run that's short, and then there's a bubble pass. Once again, they try the same thing, but Jimmer here is way too, fast and knows that it's coming, and he fills it very fast at the line of scrimmage. Now, they are on 3rd and 7 from the 10-yard line, and they call a flood right, and Aurelio finds an unlikely target here. That is number 49, Blake Branham, the all-star linebacker here, who bobbles and secures the touchdown for the score. But on the 2-point attempt, they are stonewalled, and it is now 12-17, Pondo trailing with 3:37 in the third. But honestly, seeing Blake catch that touchdown and kind of bobble it and come down with it was fun. It was a very wholesome moment. I love that Blake caught that when we were out there. Don't know if they scheduled that on purpose, but here they are, Palmer Ridge, going to get the ball here, and just nothing going for them. Number 32 for Ponderosa does make a big hit. Ethan Pekarek here, and after a drop and a deep bomb that's tipped away, they will punt. Ponderosa will start off with a loss, and then after a screen, it is 3rd and 14, and a deep pass falls incomplete and punt. So 2 3-and-outs back-to-back, and Palmer Ridge has the ball with a minute 33 in the third quarter. Now, after a couple of plays, it is 3rd and 6, and Blake Branham will make a tackle for loss to end the third quarter and force the third consecutive 3-and-out from these two teams over the past 2 series. Now, Ponderosa is at their own 38-yard line. They call a quick out to Max Mervin that picks up 5, but there's an incomplete swing on a drop, and after another incompletion, Pondo will be set up to punt for a 3-and-out. However, the punter keeps it as they call a fake that's very questionable in their own territory with a lot of yards to go. Palmer Ridge sees right through it, and it's not a 3-and-out, it's a 4-and-out as they force a turnover on downs and have the ball in enemy territory. Now, Keach and Branham make a very physical tackle, holding the gain for Palmer Ridge to only 2. And after another short run, Palmer Ridge is going to pass it to number 99, who stumbles ahead for a first down. After a handoff to Holden picks up a first down, they call a QB sneak. Well, after not only picking up a first down, but getting all the way to the 1 yard line. They call a QB sneak, but that gets flagged for shoving ahead, but it only delays the inevitable as they hand off to Holden on the very next play, who explodes through the hole for a score. And after the PAT, it is 24-13 with 8:51 left in this game. Now, Ponderosa kind of backs against the wall. Time to answer the call here. Let's see what they do. They call a quick outright to number 4, who gets to the 30-yard line. Now, they false start and have an incomplete screen and a run that sets up 3rd and 9. Aurelio tries to thread the needle and gets away with a tip that still lands in the hands of his receiver, and the Mustangs also benefit from an interesting helmet-to-helmet call for extra yards. They have back-to-back short passes to 2, who picks up a first down to the 40-yard line. And then after 2 quick incompletions, Ponderosa has 10 yards to go with 3rd down looming and 7:27 left in the game. They throw an incompletion, and now it is 4th and 10, and they throw a pass left that is intercepted by number 6, Jimmer, once again making a huge play and return into Mustang territory. The Bears are on the 36 going in, and they start off with a run from number 23, Elvira, who picks up 5 yards. He follows that with an even more physical effort on the next handoff that picks up a first down. Blake Branham swallows up the next play for a loss of 4, but after another tackle by Blake that is only good for 3 here, Palmer Ridge is going to have to settle on this drive for a field goal, and they go up 27-12 with 4:07. Ponderosa needing a quick score and starting from their own 20-yard line. They start off with a quick pass to Dylan Karsteter, who gets out of bounds, but the pass right is way too far and is picked off by number 19, Zeke Wacker, the junior defensive back for Palmer Ridge. And Palmer Ridge, that'll all but do it here as they just slowly drain Ponderosa of all their timeouts and then even throw a touchdown with about a minute 48 to go to Jimmer here once again, who dives for the catch and score, making a 34-12 ball game and souring Ponderosa's homecoming. Now, you'll hear some more insight on it later in this episode, but this is impactful for our power rankings. Palmer Ridge moves to 5-0, having beat Montrose, who's in the top 10, Mesa Ridge, who was in the top 10, Lewis Palmer, who's a, division rival at least, Ponderosa, who's in the top 10, and that does it for all of their non-league competition. They are 5-0, and they are red hot. Now, they head into league here against Rampart, that is a winning football team, but probably should be a winnable game for Palmer Ridge. And then their other league opponents will be Pueblo West, Air Academy, Cheyenne Mountain, Vista Ridge. That Pueblo West game could be a very big one, but the Bears remain undefeated and at the number 1 spot for our power rankings. Ponderosa, on the other hand, falls to 2-3 here. They're on a 3-game skid, and they have Denver South to start league play this coming Saturday. Their league is going to be way harder than most people probably thought it was. Vista Peak Prep has shown to be competitive at times, and then Thomas Jefferson is going to be a very tough out as they have finally creeped into our top 10. Be sure to listen to the 4A recap coming up next, but that'll do it for me until the Playmakers of the Week. Once again, Palmer Ridge beats Ponderosa 34-12 and shakes up our power rankings just a hair here before these teams head into league play.
Hello again, everybody. Gino here with the Playmakers Corner podcast, coming at you with the Week 5 4A recaps. This week we had games going from Thursday all the way through Saturday, so let's not waste any time and just go ahead and dive straight into the recap. Starting off with our Thursday games here, George Washington got a 26-6 win over Aurora Central. Then after that, we had number 1 Palmer Ridge, who keeps it rolling with a commanding 34-12 win over number 4 Ponderosa. Derek Hester had himself a game for Palmer Ridge, going 10 for 15, 128 yards, and a touchdown to go with another 64 yards on 16 carries on the ground. Holden Wright had 2 rushing touchdowns on 46 yards on 7 carries. And what a game from Jimmer Ware, who caught 4 passes for 80 yards and a touchdown. And on defense, he had 2 picks, 7 tackles, and a tackle for loss. Definitely keep an eye out for him for this week's Playmaker of the Week honors. For Ponderosa, Aurelio Marical really struggled passing against Palmer Ridge, finishing with 122 yards, 3 picks, and 1 touchdown on 13 of 27 passing. On defense, 3 players finished with double-digit tackles, those being Caden Miller, who had 14, and that led the way for the team, Blake Branham, who had 11 tackles and 2 tackles for loss, and Weston Hofschneider, who also had 11 tackles and a tackle for loss. In our next Thursday game here, we have number 9 Loveland dominating Greeley Central 63-19. Then we have Grand Junction, who lost to 5A Overland 21-13. In our last of the Thursday games, we have a Battle of the Vistas, where Vista Ridge beat Vista Peak by a score of 33-6. For Vista Ridge, Zayden Stevens had a huge impact in this one, going 14 for 28, 151 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks passing, to go with 39 yards rushing and 2 more touchdowns, making that 4 total on the day for him. Nashawn Hall had a nice game as well, with 106 yards rushing on 18 carries and 2 receptions, 31 yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns. On defense, Wesley Wright and J.B. Borland both caught 2 interceptions each, and Mason Carter caught a pick 6 to make it 5 total for the Vista Ridge defense. Now diving straight into these Friday games, starting off here with Stanley Lake, who got squashed by number 10 Thomas Jefferson. Stanley Lake struggled to get any sort of offense going outside of a Liam Graham 80-yard touchdown. He had 8 carries for 2 yards besides that touchdown, just to show how dominant the TJ defense was in this game. They had 3 guys on defense get double-digit tackles, with Roberto Arredondo finishing with 13 and a tackle for loss. There were no stats for Thomas Jefferson as of the recording of this podcast. Next here we have 3A Glenwood Springs, who got routed by Grand Junction Central by a score of 56-14. Then after that, Fruita Monument gets back into 4A matchups, and they come out on top here against Bear Creek in a shootout, 50-33. Fruita straight up ran the ball all over Bear Creek, with 3 players getting over 135 yards rushing. White Sharp led the team in rush yards, getting 171 yards and a touchdown on 15 carries. You then had Andres Palafox get 137 yards and a touchdown on a team-leading 22 carries. And finally, we have Amari Wilson, who had 141 yards and a touchdown on 17 carries, and he also had a lost fumble. We didn't get any defensive stats or stats for Bear Creek as of the recording of this podcast. Moving on now, we have Far Northeast, who falls to number 7 Pueblo West by a score of 14-0. For Pueblo West, Gavin Lockett struggled passing the ball, throwing for 4 picks and only 1 touchdown, but he made up for that with 102 yards and a touchdown on 11 carries on the ground. On defense, Josiah Perez had 10 tackles and a tackle for loss, and Clay Connor had a forced fumble and a sack. In the backfield for Pueblo West, Diego Aragon and Garrett O'Brien both had 1 interception apiece. For Far Northeast, 2 different players with over 100 yards rushing, those being Russell Patton, who finished with 126 yards on 22 carries, and then Kenchizi Ray, who had 100 yards of his own on 15 carries. And then on defense, Kylan Jones and Julian Griffin finished with 2 picks apiece. Next, we have an absolute shootout between Centaurus and Palmer, with Centaurus coming out on top 75-41. There's absolutely no defense in this one, as you can see. For Centaurus, though, they rushed the ball very well, with 4 different players getting a rushing touchdown. Addisoo McCormick led the way for them with 158 yards and 3 touchdowns on only 12 carries. And then Ben Mitchke finished with 113 yards and a touchdown on a team-leading 17 carries. Their QB Chance Wood tore it up, going 16 for 22, 263 yards and 3 touchdowns and a pick. Then he also added 68 yards and a rushing touchdown as well. Travis Maney got 4 receptions, 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then on special teams, Kellen Brockway had a kick return touchdown for Centaurus. In our next game here, Cheyenne Mountain falls to Denver South by a score of 37-13. It was the rushing attack led by Chevelle Early and their QB J.R. Felipe that got South the win in this one. Early finished with 185 yards and a touchdown on 24 carries, and Felipe added 62 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 18 carries. Elijah Landrum Hamilton had a big game with 6 catches, 129 yards, and a touchdown. And on defense, 4 different players had an interception, including Jeremiah Emery, who also had 5 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss. For Cheyenne Mountain, Bruce Archambault really struggled passing the ball, going 3 for 14, 49 yards, a touchdown, and 4 picks. Troy Harold had a nice game rushing the ball with 120 yards, a touchdown on 11 carries. Then on defense, Griffin LaRue had 13 tackles and a sack, and Nathaniel Lucas and McCoy Huckstep both had interceptions. Then we have 3A Northfield, who clapped Adams City by a score of 62-0. We didn't get any stats in that one for Adams City, but that's probably for the best. Next game here, we have the number 2 in our power rankings, Erie, battered Windsor by a score of 40-8. Blake Barnett had a signature game this week, 126 yards and a touchdown on the ground to go with 139 yards and 3 touchdowns on 11 of 17 passing. Braylon Tolliver added 99 yards rushing on 4 carries on offense. And then here on defense, Carson Hagman finished with 13 tackles, and Preston Terranova had a 30-yard interception return. For Windsor, they had a hard time doing anything this week, with their only touchdown being a rush from Sam Cooper in the third. On defense, it looks like Mikey Munn caught 2 picks for Windsor. Next game here, we have one of the games of the week that me and Simon attended. Falcon fell to 3A Lewis Palmer by a score of 27-7. Now, if you want a closer, more in-depth recap, then go ahead and listen to that. But let's go through some stats here. Carter Thorpe had to carry the offense with Gabriel McFarland being out, and it didn't go well. Thorpe finished with 92 yards on 25 carries, and then he passed for 168 yards, going 6 for 15 with a touchdown and a pick. Ashton Luttrell had 3 receptions for Falcon for 71 yards, including one that went 52 yards, and that helped set up Falcon's only touchdown in the game. Corey Hotel, Jaden Brewster, and Dylan Noss all had double-digit tackles, and Braden Rick had a nice game with 6 tackles and an interception. Next game here, we have 5A Chatfield, got the win over the number 8 in our power rankings, Dakota Ridge, by a score of 45-21. I don't have any stats for Dakota Ridge, but the stats for Chatfield will be in my 5A recap. Next game here, 5A Brighton loses a close one to number 6 Broomfield, 28-22. Then from there, we got Skyline, got squashed by Longmont by a score of 48-6. For Longmont, it was a big game for Colby Holmes, who finished with 5 total touchdowns on the day. He went 6 for 10, 190 yards and 3 touchdowns to go with 57 yards and 1 touchdown rushing. And then he also added a 77-yard kick return touchdown to go with that. Cole Gaddis went 2 for 2 with 2 carries and 2 touchdowns on 122 yards rushing. And then he also lost a fumble. Joey Foote caught all 4 passes for 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. Isaiah Prospero finished with 2 sacks and 7 tackles, and Logan Johnson caught an interception. Next game here, the previously undefeated 3A Lutheran lost for the first time this year to number 5 Montrose, 36-14. Next now we have 3A Palisade losing to Golden, 27-12. Next here we have Silver Creek. They dominated Greeley West by a score of 42-15. Cole Rogers was the story on offense for Silver Creek with 131 yards and 2 touchdowns on 16 carries. QB Eli Myers also had a solid game with 2 rushing touchdowns on 19 yards, and then passing the ball, he went 5 for 9, 102 yards with a pick and no touchdowns. On defense, Levi Walker had 2 sacks and a fumble recovery that he returned for a touchdown. And then Ibrahim Kabor had 6 tackles, a sack, and 2 tackles for loss. And then finally, Bubba Fisk finished with 4 tackles and a sack. Next game here, we have number 3 Heritage get the win over Rampart, 42-20. For Heritage, Kurt Rosner threw the ball amazingly well, going 10 for 13, 154 yards, and 2 TDs. He also ran the ball well, finishing with 90 yards and 2 more TDs on 11 carries. Next, we have a team just outside our top 10, Monarch, falling to 5A Pooter, 27-7. It wasn't Riley Montemayor's best game throwing the ball, as he finished with 160 yards, 3 picks, and only 1 touchdown on 14-25 passing. Owen Mellish finished with 3 receptions for 55 yards. In total, 8 different Monarch players finished with at least 1 reception. Last of our Friday games, we have Coronado, lost in a close one to Air Academy, 28-26. Let's get into these 3 Saturday games here, starting with Widefield, who got absolutely mauled by Mesa Ridge, 66-14. It was an offensive explosion for Mesa, with Trevon Salas getting 98 yards and 2 touchdowns on 10 carries, and Isaiah Jones got 70 yards and 3 touchdowns on 10 carries. For QB, Bryce Reel went 7 for 12, 128 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks, and then another 42 yards rushing on just 3 carries. On defense, Caleb Chico forced 2 fumbles, with him recovering 1, and Anthony Smith recovering the other one for a touchdown. In our second to last Saturday game, Thornton fell to Gateway 40-6 to give Gateway their first win on the year. Gateway was led on offense by Niall Sorrell, who finished with 175 yards rushing and 4 touchdowns on only 9 carries. Maximus Matthews did it all for Gateway, also finishing with 4 carries, 38 yards, 3 receptions, 37 yards, and then a 75-yard kick return touchdown to the house. In our last game on Saturday, Liberty completely shut out and dominated Hinckley by a score of 52-0.
Now we're just going to switch it up a little bit here and toss it over to Coach V to talk girls flag football this weekend before bouncing back to Gino and then back to Simon after that.
What's good, y'all? It's Coach V here, and I got another girls flag football, Colorado girls flag football recap here. Went to another little jamboree. This time it was at Vista Peak Prep here on Saturday, September 23rd, 2023, and got to catch a couple games here with my guy Gideon, and also shout out Mode Ford here, and follow his stuff as well. He got to get some good clips, and we actually interviewed a couple people, so look out for that little collab coming out on our Instagram here pretty soon though. But on this one, like I said, gonna recap some of the games that I was able to watch. As of right now, I think most people know this that are listening to this, but I'm just gonna say it anyways. Girls high school flag football, not yet an official sanctioned CHSAA sport, but definitely on the way. It feels like there's at least double the programs there were last year compared to the second year, which is awesome. And so that's great. But with that being said, don't have access to rosters, right? And so if you have rosters or schedules or whatever, feel free to send it our way on our social medias at Playmakers Corner. That way we know who we're talking about, and we could actually mention some names here. Was able to pick up a couple names as we go, specifically for Arvada West, which is cool, but want to get to know more players so that we could cover this thing the right way, because we will be covering the playoffs for Colorado Girls High School flag football. Hopefully district-wise, for sure. We won't be able to make it to all of them, I don't think, but for sure the one at the Broncos training facility, the Pat Bolin facility over there. We're going to cover all of that in full, just like we did last year. And so if you have any information on Colorado Girls High School flag football, feel free to send it our way. We'd love to cover as many teams as possible. But let's go ahead and get this thing started here. So we got to see Pomona play for the first time. Going into today, they're undefeated, it sounded like, and they got to play Mountain Vista here early in the morning to start. They were playing in that not little field, but it's basically Vista Peak Stadium. I mean, there were stands, there was a gate, there was a scoreboard, and then the field was cut into 3 parts per usual. So that was that whole deal there. And so we got to see Pomona face off with Mountain Vista. Not the same Mountain Vista team. that I got to watch last week here over at LPS. I couldn't tell if it was the JV or varsity or if they just split it. That would have been fair as well, but definitely a different Mountain Vista team. Pomona would go ahead and take care of them, though. Number 15 for Pomona. Big time baller, tall athlete. She got a nice pick 6 against Mountain Vista that really went ahead and put them away here. A lot of turnovers in that game. Pomona, though, forced a lot of those, and they did get more. Obviously scored more than Mountain Vista, who is a first-year program, Pomona being a second-year program, so you got to consider that. But Pomona came away with a nice one to start the day there. On the other side, we had Arvada West. I believe this is Arvada West Black, the team that did go to state last year. Unfortunately, lost just short to Chatfield, but they were playing Green Mountain, a first-year program, and this one was not exactly close here. Sailor Swanson, QB number 18 for this Arvada West team, was putting on a clinic. Oh my God. She threw at least 4 touchdowns. It sounded like Sarah Walker was out there as well doing her thing, per usual, number 21, I want to say. And so that was a tough duo to stop. Like I said, Green Mountain, a first-year program, so it's kind of hard to expect for them to play extremely well against a team that went to state, and we're just clicking to start the morning there. So good win by Arvada West to go ahead and take care of Green Mountain there. Following that, though, Arvada West would go ahead and play that Mountain Vista team that just played Pomona earlier. Like I said, not the one I saw last week. And they went ahead and took care of business against them as well. That wasn't exactly a super close game. Went very similarly to the Green Mountain game, in my opinion there. And so that was another good win for them. On the other hand, Pomona would go ahead and play Green Mountain here. And once more, this Pomona defense was playing really well. Forced a lot of turnovers. Had a couple big splash offensive plays there. Number 15 for Pomona, having herself a nice day there. Like I said, if you have rosters or if you know who these people are, feel free to message us so that we know who these great athletes are and could refer to them by name. But number 15 was having herself a day. And so there you go there. Those 2 games went like that. And then Pomona would go ahead and play Arvada West, the battle of the unbeatens. This was a great game, honestly. And, to start here, it really looked like Pomona scored at the beginning. They picked off Arvada West, right, to start this game, and they got into the red zone here within 10-ish, 15-ish yards. There was a play that looked like maybe she tiptoed in there, but she was ruled down. And so Arvada West actually held pretty strong here a number of times. And I will just say this to start, Arvada West had a lot of turnovers, just a lot of interceptions. This Pomona defense was playing well. There was one interception where it just looked like a straight up miscommunication. I don't know exactly where Sailor was throwing one of these balls here, but it had to have been also on the receiver as well. And so Pomona's defense was playing well, but their offense was struggling. There were a couple plays that they probably wish they got back. They did take a deep shot on this one play. It looked like it was just a straight go, but Sailor Swanson was there and got a really key deflection, and if she didn't, then that would have went to the house for a touchdown. And so this one came down to the wire. Both teams really took turns driving down the field, but would either, throw a turnover or have a turnover, or, it would stall out. And so it would come down to near the end of this game here, Arvada West with the ball. It was maybe 3rd or 4th down. I think it was 4th down. They're on still their side of the field, not past midfield yet. And here's what happened here. Sailor Swanson drops back, and she rips a nice throw deep down the right sideline to Sarah Walker, who almost looks like she's triple coveraged at this point. But this is just a perfect throw, a great throw here by Sailor Swanson. And Walker goes up and gets this one and rumbles down the field here. That's a big, almost 40 to 50 yard splash play, it feels like, right there, to go ahead and set them up in the red zone. And then from there, I want to say 2 or 3 plays later, it was a nice little rollout left, and Swanson goes ahead and pitches it to Molly Shellpepper. I believe that's how you say her name. And she went ahead and caught this one. This was a great play design here. It looked like there was a little pick play action, and the linebacker who was guarding Molly got lost up in there. And so that's a great touchdown to go ahead and give Arvada West the lead here. Extra point would be no good. And then following that, Pomona would try to get something going here. They did though to, I want to say it was either number 5 or number 3 on a nice little short route here, and she made something happen. She would actually get Pomona to around midfield, but from there, this Arvada West team would just lock up and would stop them, and there you go. There, Arvada West remains undefeated, winning a close one against Pomona though, 6-0 there. With these games, you gotta keep in mind there's like no scoreboard, so if you're not listening to the ref, then you don't know what the situation was. I originally thought that Pomona did get in that first half because they had multiple opportunities where they were maybe 1 or 2 yards away from scoring, it felt like, but A West just stopped them. And so this was a great win for Arvada Wester. Did get to talk to both Saylor and Sarah Walker after the game here. And, you know, like I said, look out for that interview coming out probably on Instagram here in either this week or in a couple weeks here. Either way, right? Shout out my guy Mode. And, you know, they did say this was a hard defense to score on, and I would have to agree. This Pomona defense looked really good. The offense didn't even look that bad. I mean, they weren't moving the ball. They were moving the ball really well. Got into the red zone a couple of times, but it just came down to converting, right? Just came down to converting. And so that's tough, right? But like I said, defense played well. Did force a couple of turnovers here, at least 3 or 4. Including one really nice interception that happened in the end zone, actually. Sailor Swanson taking a shot deep left in the second half, and this was just a great interception by that safety over there. And so that was a great, and plus she returned it almost to midfield as well. And so that's kind of an opportunity you got to take advantage of. Multiple opportunities you got to take advantage of. But if you're Pomona, I mean, you can't be that mad about it. It's regular season, right? So come playoffs, you know what you got to do against this team, and you just got to execute. But regardless, an excellent flag football game here. Love to watch that one. Moving on here, though, we had Horizon versus Legacy, 2 first-year programs, and this was a very interesting one here. Number 1 for Horizon, played a bit of quarterback, was a great athlete, a safety as well. She really shined in this game. Throws a great spiral, a great ball here, has an absolute cannon on her arm, and she's going to be an issue. Also, she's real athletic too, real shifty, and so Horizon has themselves a quarterback, and she played really well on defense as well. Like I said, played at safety. Had a pick 6 to end the game against Legacy, who kind of just struggled. Not like a bad team at all, but Horizon, I mean, they were really well coached here. And, I mean, they were just ready to play early on. This was their first game, I want to say. And so this was just a good first game to have this morning here at Vista Peak for Horizon as they go ahead and take care of Legacy pretty handedly here. Like I said, shout out to number 1. Also, number 12 for Horizon. She's the other safety for them. Played a good game as well. Had an interception. Could have had another one, but dropped it. It happens. They laughed it off. And, you know, they look really good back there. That safety duo for Horizon, their defense looked solid offensively. You know, they were just clicking. It was their day. And so love to see that. Also got to see Ralston Valley here, another first-year program, play Mountain Vista. Now, this was the Mountain Vista team that we saw from last week here. And, you know, number 2 at quarterback, she's a dog. And the number of dots she was throwing over the middle on rollouts or just standing there or whatever was absolutely insane here. She was cooking for this team. And here's kind of how it went here. To start, Ralston Valley would go ahead and score first here and would get the conversion. Nice little catch in the back there. So there you go there. Number 15 for Ralston Valley with a couple really nice shifty moves in a row to take that lead by the way here. Following that, Mountain Vista would eventually respond here. Like I said, a lot of nice completions over the middle. Number 2 was cooking here. She would find her receiver, number 3, on this one to go ahead and make it 7-6, but I don't think the PAT was good. Following that, Ralston Valley. They would go ahead and throw this one to number 15, but it would get tipped up. But no worries, number 15 would go ahead and catch this one and take it about 40 yards across midfield. They would then throw it out to number 5 here to make it 14-6. From there, Ralston Valley would just hold on to this one. Their defense, really tall, a lot of tall athletes over there, but their defense is really tough to play. Contested pretty much every single pass there, and so we're making it tough on Mountain Vista to move the ball up and down. And I will say this, there were a lot of drops for Mountain Vista in this one, at least 10. I would have to say at least 10, and obviously in flag football, can't have it. You can't have it. You have to catch passes. The more passes you catch, the higher, probability you have of winning the game, and they just were dropping some wide open catches, not to mention, Ralston Valley just being in their faces all night long, I believe, or I guess all morning long, and I believe Ralston Valley would score one more touchdown at the end, and Mountain Vista would score another one, a long touchdown at the end, but this game was pretty much over by this point. I mean, they just played really good defense, Ralston Valley, that is, and, they're going to be a team to look out for moving forward. Mountain Vista, I mean, they got a quarterback, right? They definitely got a quarterback. She is extremely talented. I think she's a college-level player here, and so it's going to be interesting to see how well she plays moving forward for Mountain Vista here. But the receivers got to do a little bit better here. Defensively, I don't even think they were that bad, but it's a little disappointing when your offense can't move the ball super well. But big ups to Ralston Valley, who played extremely well in this one. And so there you go there. That is your Colorado Girls High School Flag Football recap for this weekend. Trying to catch at least a couple games each Saturday here leading up to playoffs. We are looking to potentially bring on one more person to help us cover Girls High School Flag Football. So super excited for that. But like I said, if you have any information on players, like player names, rosters, schedules, whatever, please let us know. And we'd love to go ahead and make sure we give them the proper recognition here. But until next time, I'll catch you next week.
What is going on, everybody? Gino here with the Playmakers Corner podcast, and I am coming at you here with the Week 5 5A recaps. Let's not waste any more time and go ahead and dive straight into these games. So for the Thursday games, we're going to start off here with Fort Collins, who gets mashed by number 4 West Littleton by a score of 57-13. West Littleton jumped out to a 43-0 lead at halftime, and that was all she wrote. 6 different players for West Littleton had a rushing touchdown, with Josh Snyder getting 120 yards and 2 touchdowns on only 4 carries. On defense, 3 different players had an interception. Nico Zaharis forced a safety, and Jack Hansen had a pick on defense to go with 50 yards rushing and a touchdown on offense. For Fort Collins, sophomore QB Justin Cranford finished with 145 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks on 16 of 30 passing. Kevin Lozano had 90 yards and 5 touchdowns on only 5 carries, and Joe Nottingham had 7 catches for 49 yards and a touchdown. In our next game here, we have Cherokee Trail, who falls to the number 9 in our power rankings, Castleview, by a score of 23-7. Castleview's defense has only allowed 1 score in each of their first 5 games. In this one, they have 5 sacks as a team, with Owen McPherson adding 2 of his own. And then Jackson Brenner also added a sack to go with his 7 tackles and 3 tackles for loss. And then Isaac Yore also forced a fumble. On offense for Castleview, it was Ethan Gonzalez and Aaron Perry leading the way, with both getting double-digit carries and just under 100 yards, and Gonzalez added a touchdown on the ground as well. It was another efficient game for their QB, Derek Gordon, who went 16 for 22 and a touchdown on only 77 yards passing. Interesting. And then finally on special teams for Castleview, Ben Knox had a 96-yard kick return to the house. For CT, it looks like they decided to lean on Elliot Ming this week, as he took the bulk of the snaps at QB, going 19 for 29, 158 yards, and a touchdown. Carson Pierce caught 10 of those passes for 54 yards, and then Peyton Castro added 7 receptions of his own for 58 yards. In our next game, we have Chaparral, who falls to Thunder Ridge by a score of 41-6. For Thunder Ridge, it was Evan Olds and their QB Ryan Gonzalez leading the way on offense. Olds had a monster game with 205 yards and 2 touchdowns on 35 carries. Then Gonzalez added 165 yards and 2 touchdowns of his own on 21 carries. And then passing the ball, he went 9 of 20 for 51 yards for another touchdown and 2 picks. On defense, Evan Bilby caught 2 picks and forced a fumble to go with his 5 tackles, so big game for him. For Shap, it looks like sophomore Beckett Bacon came in as QB and threw for 92 yards and a touchdown and 2 picks on 6 of 16 passing. Then Bacon also caught an interception on defense, and so did Nolan Segal. Next game, we have 4A Grand Junction, who falls to Overland by a score of 21-13. Moving on now, we have Lakewood, who loses badly to Eagle Crest by a score of 44-7. For Eagle Crest, Joe Steiner had 3 total touchdowns, going 6 for 10 for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns, and a pick to go with a 13-yard touchdown run. Coda Becker went 2 for 2 with 2 carries and 2 touchdowns for 42 yards. Then Logan Ryan had himself yet another multi-touchdown week with 4 receptions for 79 yards and 2 TDs. On defense, what a game from Ramaji Owens, who had 3 pass deflections and an 86-yard pick six. In our last of the Thursday games, we have an absolutely classic game with number 3 Roston Valley pulling out the win over Valor Christian by a score of 22-21. What a thriller this one was. Logan Madden had himself a Playmaker of the Week type game against Valor, going 18 for 24, 181 yards, and the game-winning touchdown pass and 2-point conversion. He scored the other 2 Mustang touchdowns on the ground as well, adding 63 yards and 2 touchdowns on 9 carries. Jackson Hansen caught both the game-winning touchdown and 2-point conversion as he finished with 5 catches for 40 yards on the game. On defense, Laird Jones led the way with 14 tackles, and then George Patterson had himself another big game as he added 11 of his own. For Valor, they did just about everything they could do to win this one, even having a 1 TD lead with around a minute to go in the game. They even finally got their run game going this week with Gabe Sawchuk getting 119 yards and a touchdown on 18 carries. Sophomore Chase Hanosh added 38 yards and a touchdown on 7 carries, and Asher Weiner had himself a 22-yard rushing TD to take the lead late in the fourth with not much time remaining. Weiner also had an efficient game throwing the ball, going 12 for 15, 82 yards, and no picks. On defense for Valor, Alexander Jordan forced a fumble, and Jack Brown led the team with 12 tackles. Let's go ahead and jump right into these Friday games. Starting off here with number 6, Legend dominated Legacy by a score of 31-10. It was another big week for the 3-headed monster backfield of Jaden Lawrence, Alex Martinez, and Riken Banks for the Titans. Alex Martinez actually got the bulk of the carries this week, putting up season highs in both yards and carries, putting up 133 yards and a touchdown on 24 carries. Lawrence got his fair share too, of course, adding 50 yards and 2 touchdowns on 13 carries. And then finally, Riken Banks making his impact felt in the pass game with 5 catches, 62 yards, and a touchdown. Jeff Baca followed up his big week last week with 5 catches for 67 yards. And Michael Marcinich continues to make improvements each week, going 15 for 26, 177 yards, a touchdown, and no picks. On defense for the Titans, Jamar Yancey had 9 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a fumble recovery. Then Billy McGuckin had a forced fumble. Champ Jones caught a pick. On special teams, Carson Flowers had 4 punts, with all of them landing inside the 20-yard line. For Legacy, it was a slow game offensively, but on defense, you had Omari Bursey, who had a nice game with 14 tackles and a tackle for loss, and Sawyer Rapon had the team's only sack. Next, we got Mountain Range, who got the win over Boulder, 14-7. Next game here, the number 1 in our power rankings, Creek, stays unbeaten with a win over Regis Jesuit with a score of 47-28. It looks like Creek is truly starting to get their passing game rolling, as that's 2 weeks in a row now, with Brady Vodka slinging the ball really, really well. He finished this one going 14 for 19, 206 yards, and 4 passing touchdowns. And then he also added 50 yards on 10 rushes on the ground and a lost fumble. Jordan Herron, of course, dominated on the ground with 130 yards and 2 touchdowns on 16 carries. And then he stays involved in the pass game as well, leading the team in receiving yards with 52 and another touchdown. Speaking of receiving, sophomore Maxwell Lovett had 4 receptions, 50 yards, and 2 touchdowns. On defense for Creek, Angelo Petridis had 10 tackles and an interception, and Jake Howell led the team in tackles with 11, and he also had an interception. I didn't get any stats for Regis as of the recording of this podcast. Next game, we have 3A Northridge, who stays unbeaten with a win over Rangeview by a score of 31-21. Next game here, number 5 Arapahoe completely shut out Rock Canyon by a score of 24-0. Michael Moynihan had himself a game for the Warriors, passing 10 for 20, 109 yards and a touchdown to go with 34 yards rushing and another touchdown on only 4 carries. Carter Neely got 62 yards and a touchdown on 12 carries, and Andrew Smart had 3 receptions, 39 yards and a touchdown, and a punt inside the 20 on special teams. On defense for the Warriors, some of the guys to lead the way in this shutout were David Moritz with a team-leading 11 tackles, Will Knox with another big game. He had 9 tackles and an interception and half a tackle for loss. And then Wyatt Starbuck forced a fumble, and 3 different Warriors had a sack. There were no stats for Rock Canyon as of the recording of this video. Next game here, Horizon beats Rocky Mountain by a score of 23-3. After that, Smoky Hill got battered by Highlands Ranch, who's been having a very tough schedule this year. They really needed this one. They won 41-0 over Smoky Hill. Then next we have Grandview, who pulled out the win over Pomona. Didn't get any stats for that one either. But here we got some stats for this one. Doherty fell to the number 6 in our power rankings, Fountain Fort Carson, by a score of 42-0. For Fountain, Caleb Kites showed some ability to throw the ball this week, going 9 for 16, 149 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But he wasn't done there, as he added 2 more touchdowns on the ground and 38 yards rushing on 9 carries. Matthias Price finished with 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on 14 carries, and Terrence Morris continues to light it up, adding 120 yards of his own on only 11 carries. For receiving, Keenan Campbell had 4 catches, 74 yards, and 2 touchdowns. For Doherty, the story was Logan Hutchin, who got 202 yards on 7 receptions. Next game here, Brighton lost a close one to 4A Broomfield, 28-22. In our next Friday game, Fairview got a win over Douglas County by a score of 49-7. There was a Playmaker of the Week worthy performance this week in this one, that being Jordan Rochelle, who put up an absurd 5 touchdowns and 190 yards rushing on 19 carries. Brock Kolstad added another 64 yards and a touchdown on 8 carries as well. On defense, Max Nedbalski scooped up a fumble and took it 44 yards to the house, and Ryder Villarreal had a pick. Next game here, Arvada West fell to Fossil Ridge as they get their second win on the year, 42-28. Fossil Ridge got this win on the back of the 5A Playmaker of the Week in Week 4, Cole Pollock, who does it again this week, going 124 yards, 2 touchdowns on 22 carries, and he also added a 39-yard touchdown pass to go with that. Their QB, Nick Kubat, went 14 for 18, 158 yards and a touchdown and an interception. Marcus Moser caught both of the passing touchdowns on the day, going 8 catches, 110 yards, and 2 touchdowns. You also had Jake Toshkoff, who has his best game of the year with 123 yards and 2 touchdowns on 15 carries. Arvada West had the score knotted up 28-28 heading into the 4th, but couldn't pull it out. For them, Logan Duhacek had himself a very nice game passing the ball, as he finished with 261 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks on 19 of 27 passing. Adrian Samaya got a whopping 150 yards and a touchdown on only 15 carries, and he also added 3 catches, 46 yards, and another touchdown receiving. 4 different receivers had at least three catches and at least 45 yards, and 3 different receivers caught a touchdown pass for Arvada West. On defense, Cooper Greason had an interception, and Jackson Pyatt had 7 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. Next, we got Pooter, who got a nice win over 4A Monarch, 27-7. Then we had another cross-class matchup where Chatfield put up some big numbers in a win over 4A Dakota Ridge, 45-21. This was an insane game from Chatfield's Jake Jones, who put up 5 total touchdowns in this one. He had 384 yards passing, going 18 for 25 with 3 touchdowns and a pick to go with 2 rushing touchdowns on 4 carries on the ground. Drew Rallman caught all 3 of those passing touchdowns as he finished with 5 catches and 138 yards receiving and those 3 TDs. Michael Lumpkin also had a 100-yard day, finishing with 105 yards on 5 receptions. On defense, Logan Kundred finished with 19 tackles. Reed Narva had 15 tackles and 2 tackles for loss. And Nate Helms with 10 tackles and a sack and 3 tackles for loss. You also had Caleb Espinoza recovering his own fumble, and he took it 30 yards all the way to the house. And then Goose Shelp caught another interception. Next year, we have number 2 Pine Creek shutting out Mullen 35-0. Pine Creek's 3-headed monster backfield of Mason Miller, Jonathan Core, and Cannon Budge led the way for them, as it appears Cameron Cooper was out in this one. Miller is starting to get hot on offense, putting up 146 yards and a touchdown on 14 carries. Then you have Jonathan Core, who keeps it rolling with 2 touchdowns of his own and 101 yards on 13 carries. And then finally, Cannon Budge led the team in carries with 18 for 78 yards. On defense, 6 different players had a sack, including Isaac Landry, who also led the team in tackles with 9 and 2 tackles for loss. Amari Kyle had a pick, and Matt Jerry had 1.5 sacks for Pine Creek. In our last game here for 5A, we have Prairie View dominating North Glen by a score of 45-6.
So do you want to know what the best kept secret in running back training is? It's MadSkillz RB1 Training. Coach Voss is flipping the script and leveling up running back training in Colorado by implementing his proven, nationally recognized system of training. Don't be fooled by the name. Quarterbacks and receivers become fundamentally sound juke artists as well with his training. It's evident the athletes he trains love him. Each progressive training session arms the athlete with a new skill set that prepares them to be shifty, powerful, and elusive. Parents love Coach Voss because with his training, they receive free college recruiting tips, no contracts, and no drama. Message him on Instagram at MadSkillz _RB1 Training or at Coach Cut Creator on Twitter, X, for more information. Off-season runs from January through July, so get in the cut and get some MadSkillz this off-season.
What's good, y'all? Coach V here. Let's go ahead and talk power rankings, but before we do that, let me explain how these work. So myself, Cody, Gino, and Gideon, we rank teams 1 through 10 individually, that is. We do that individually, ranking teams 1 through 10, 1A through 5A, and how that works is that if anyone ranks a team at number 1, they get 10 points, 2, 9, 3, 8, so forth and so forth. And then after that, so those are our personal rankings, I go ahead and add up the points that each team got, and then that's basically our order for our PMC podcast rankings. So throughout this segment, you're going to hear me refer to our personal rankings and PMC rankings, as each of these guys here have given me reasons for why they've moved a team up or down. So there you go there. But without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into our 1A power rankings here. Last week, after week 4, here's how it went. Just outside getting top 10 votes, though, was Wright and Wiggins. At 10 was North Fork, 9 Gunnison, 8 Colorado Springs Christian, 7 Buena Vista, 6 Strasburg, 5 Meeker. Tied for 3rd was Ray and Bating Lewis Academy, 2 Holyoke, and number 1 was Lyman. Now this week, pretty similarly started here. We have 2 teams just outside in Rye and Wiggins who were ranked in our top 10 here. I had Rye ranked in our top 10. I right at 10 here. I believe they went ahead and won. It was a game that they should have won, right? But I still think this is a very talented squad. I really like Dylan Hearn and what he has been doing for Rye over there. And so I'm not going to drop them, obviously. They beat Trinidad, by the way, 47-0. I'm not going to drop him, obviously. It's going to take a lot to drop a team outside the top 10 when they win, at least for me. So there you go there. Gideon has Wiggins here at 10. They didn't play, but that is a result of a team moving out of his top 10 here. Not moving out of their top 10. You already had Wiggins at 10, but they didn't play. They were at 10 last weekend, so he just kept them there. So there you go there. Those are the two teams just outside. Now, at number 10 is Colorado Springs Christian here. Suffered a tough loss against Woodland Park. I believe they lost 24-7. Woodland Park being winless before this one. And that's a tough go, right? And so we have them here at 10. They drop, I want to say, 2 spots here. Gideon did not have too much to say about that. Gino had this to say about Colorado Springs Christian, though, who he put at 10. He said, only putting up 7 against a previously winless Woodland Park team is inexcusable. They stay at the top 10 for now, but games coming up against Rye and Banning Lewis could mean trouble for the Lions. And yes, that is true. I should be at the Banning Lewis versus Colorado Springs Christian game. That'll be a good one here. But absolutely have to agree with that. This was pretty surprising. I think all of us kind of assumed Colorado Springs Christian would win, as we did get our power rankings done a little earlier yesterday. And then had to change them this morning, as in Sunday morning, the 24th. And so that pretty much reflects how we all feel about Colorado Springs Christian. I did not have them in my top 10 before, so there's that. But everyone else, including Gideon and Cody, has dropped Colorado Springs Christian here pretty significantly. Gideon has them now at 9, and then Cody dropped them a couple of spots similar to Gino, like 4 or 5 spots as well. So there you go there. That's Colorado Springs Christian. But moving on here, at number 9, we have North Fork, who does move up 1 spot here. This is what Gino has to say about North Fork. They've scored 35 or more points in every game so far this year. If they can continue that streak next week against Buena Vista, then they should be able to move up in my rankings. Gideon actually at North Fork just outside his top 10, so there you go there. I have North Fork up here just ahead of everyone else, I feel. I have them at 7, so there is that. I feel good about them. They played Cedar Edge, but Cedar Edge is a solid team in my opinion. That was a close game, like a 10-point game, so there is that, but I still feel good about them. Cody, he has North Fork here now at 7. He says they are rolling and continued with a solid win over a highly seeded Chassa Special this week. So there you go there. If you look at the seeding index, they had Cedar Edge ranked in the top 10. So for North Fork to win, that's obviously huge for them. So boom, there you go there. Let's go ahead and move on, though. We have Gunnison right here at 8. I believe they move up 1 spot with Colorado Springs Christian moving down here. This is what Cody had to say about Gunnison. He currently has them at 10, but he says, sure, they won, but their loss to Buena Vista looms. So there you go there. I have Gunnison at the same spot right now here at 9. This is what Gideon had to say about Gunnison, who he has at 7, moving up 1 spot. He said, beat an extremely mid-Coal Ridge team. Still don't think they beat Strasburg. I still don't think they beat Strasburg more often than not. So there you go. Gino said this. 40-0 shutout is always a good thing. Their games against Meeker and North Fork to end the year should tell us a lot about this Gunnison squad. Yeah, absolutely agreed. Those are big-time teams here who, well, North Fork's ranked behind them now, but Meeker is ranked in front of them. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens moving forward, see where they're at. That Buena Vista loss was pretty shocking. So we'll see what happens there. Speaking of Buena Vista, though, they are at 7, still here. Nothing changes compared to last week. Gino had this to say about Buena Vista. There's some positive and some negative takeaways from that Lyman game, but I'll hold them. I'll say holding them, to 21 points is a good sign for me despite the shutout. Cody had this to say about Buena Vista, who he has a 9. They forced Lyman to adapt and work harder for scores more this year on defense, but I had a feeling inexperience on offense would lead to the result from Saturday, which was a loss. Gideon had this to say about Buena Vista here, who he has a 4 actually. He said this, and by the way, they did not move down or up in his power rankings, his personal rankings, but he said this about BV. The Demons did lose to Lyman, but they lost by less than Strasburg, and Ray didn't play. So there you go. He moved Buena Vista ahead of Ray in his power rankings. So boom, there you go there. Or actually, he did move Ray ahead of his power rankings. They stayed the same, but I think if Ray played and won, then we would have moved them ahead, is what he meant there. So there you go there. Moving on, we have Meeker, who is now at 6. They actually moved down 1 spot, but they did not play this week. I think it was more of a result of other teams moving up. I mean, it definitely had to have been that. So there you go there. It's just I guess kind of how things shook out for them at the end. Moving on, we have Strasburg, who actually moves up 1 spot. Cody has this to say about Strasburg, who he has at 7 in his personal rankings. He said this: continuing their win streak against Bennett is a nice touch. A blowout, by the way, against Bennett. Gino said this: they are done with the hard part of their schedule, so their potential to move up is capped for the most part, unless some bad losses in the top 5 go down. Yeah, gotta agree with that. This is what Gideon said: beating a 2A team in Bennett in a rivalry game. But Bennett is dog water this year, so that it doesn't say much to me. And yeah, I gotta agree, they definitely took a step back compared to last year, Bennett, that is. But regardless, good win for Strasburg. They neither move up or down for me. But in our personal rankings, in our power rankings, they move up 1. In my personal rankings, they stay the same. So there you go, Strasburg at 5. And then basically from here on out, our top 4 stays the same, I believe, here. Tied for 3 still is Banning Lewis Academy and Ray. It's pretty interchangeable at this point. At 2 is Holyoke. At number 1 is Lyman still, as things continue to stay the same. Ray did not play this week, so there's that. But this is what the boys had to say about Banning Lewis Academy. Gino said, Banning Lewis keeps the blowouts coming. Gideon said this about Banning Lewis: continues their dominant streak to open league play. The Stallions will have to win out to make playoffs at this rate, though. Chassis seeding index is really screwing them over. Ooh, that's a hot take. It's not that hot a take, because I also agree. Cody said this. He had this to say about Banning Lewis. He said, don't care too much about Rocky Ford week. So there you go there. But yeah, no, I have to agree. Banning Lewis, look, they are currently undefeated as it stands right now. And they're a lot better of a team than the Chassis seeding index indicates, which, by the way, will basically show where teams will be at. It's basically the playoff picture moving forward here, if you want to look at that, which we'll cover here in the later weeks here, but we're going to do our power rankings for a couple more weeks until we get to like maybe the last 2 weeks of the regular season. But yeah, Banning Lewis Academy, they got to win out. Well, maybe not even win out. They got to beat Rye, okay? And they got to beat Colorado Springs Christian. If they lose, that is going to hurt them a lot more and may even put them out of the playoffs. I'm not going to lie, which is crazy, but that's just where it is right now. So there you go there. Now, let's talk about the other team tied with, that was Ray. That was tied at 3 there. So Banning Lewis and Ray are at 3. Moving up, though, at 2 is Holyoke, who stays the same here. And they did not play this week, so nothing to say. Lyman is still at 1 here. This is what the boys had to say about them. Gideon said, solid win over a really good Buena Vista squad. Gino said, you shut out a top 10 squad. You stay at number 1. Yep, you win, you stay in there. Cody said this shutout against another top team shows they're still the standard. And yeah, I mean, absolutely agreed with all of that. Definitely expected them to win this game against Buena Vista, but for them to win the way they did, that is always a good thing. So there you go there. But that's our 1A rankings. Like I said, just outside, Ryan Wiggins. At 10, Colorado Springs Christian. 9, North Fork. 8, Gunnison. 7, Buena Vista. 6, Meeker. 5, Strasburg. Tied at 3, Banning Lewis Academy and Ray. 2, Holyoke. And at number 1 is Lyman. Let's go ahead and move on here, though, to our 2A rankings. So last week, here's how it went. Just outside at, I guess technically at 11 is Wellington. That's one that Gideon voted for, by the way, which we'll talk about later. At 10 is Eden, 9 Arvada, 8 TCA, 7 University, 6 Rifle, 5 La Junta, 4 Basalt, 3 Elizabeth, 2 Berthoud, and number 1 is Delta. I will say for this week's rankings, most of it should pretty much be the same. A lot of teams did not play, so there you go there. Wellington is still in Gideon's top 10, so they got a top 10 vote here, but they're just out. They did not play this week, but going into it at 10 still is Eden. This is what Gino had to say about them. Well, actually, they did not play this week, so nobody had anything to say about them but myself, Cody, and Gino. So is Eden ranked up there. Eden is outside the top 10 for Gideon here, along with Ken Denver, by the way. At number 9 is Arvada, who did not play as well, so they stay right there. At number 8 here is University, who actually moves down one spot, interesting enough. Let's see what the boys had to say about them. Gideon said this: beat Highland by almost 30. Gino said this about University, another team that got back on track with the win. Some solid options coming up, though, so it's possible they can move up here in the next weeks with some wins, of course. So there you go. Cody had this to say about University. He said this: took care of business as they should. So there you go. Like I said, not too much changing here, but that's how it goes. I think someone must have moved them down. It might have been, maybe it was me. No, it was not me. I did not move them down. So it's interesting. They must have moved down for somebody for them to move down one spot here. So there you go. But let's go ahead and talk about our 7th team here. That is TCA, who moves up one spot after another close win here. This is what Cody had to say about TCA, who he has at 6, by the way. So there you go. That's your movement. He said, kind of surprised how many points Sand Creek scored after watching them last week, but the Titans more than matched it. I mean, they won. So there you go. Gino had this to say about TCA. They were down at half to a team in Sand Creek that I expected them to win big against. They turned it around in the second half, so they won't drop. But man, giving up 31 against Sand Creek is not great. Yeah, agreed. 31. Yeah, that's a lot. So there you go. This is what Gideon had to say. Clawed back from being down 21-24 at half to one of the worst teams in the state to win by almost 20. Very shaky. Another performance like this, I may drop the Titans next week. But for now, TCA is right here at 7 according to our rankings. At 6, though, is Rifle. They stay right here. Gideon said this about Rifle, doubled up on Brush. Gino said this: I was a bit worried how they would respond against Brush after their loss last week, but they took care of business and got back on track with a win. Cody said this about Rifle here: the Bears got a solid bounce back win over the Beat Diggers to retain their spot. Yeah, this was definitely a game that I expected them to win. If they lost, then they would have dropped easily. So there you go. But they stay here for now. Now, we're going to go ahead and go to 4 here because we have a tie here at 4. It's La Junta and Basalt. Basalt was already up here, but La Junta does move up one spot. Let's talk about Basalt. Well, I guess we can't talk about Basalt because they did not play this week, so really nothing to say there. So no movements, but let's talk about La Junta. Who also, I guess they did not play this week either. Let me check just in case. This is what Gideon had to say about La Junta. Didn't play, but the more I think about it, the more I think La Junta has an insanely high ceiling. And Cody, all he said was almost time for league. So yeah, La Junta has been playing really well. You know, I think the more we look at La Junta this season, the more faith we have in them and what they've done so far. So really feeling good about them at this point. That's probably why they moved up one spot and are currently tied with Basalt for 4th. Now, our top 3 stays the same. Elizabeth at 3, Berthoud at 2, Delta at 1. Elizabeth did not play this week, so I don't think there's really anything the boys had to say. Oh, well, this is what Cody had to say. This is a level of bye week that I'm more comfortable if teams move up just because it's after a big win and before a big game, right? About mid-season. Well done, AD. All right, so he's just talking about scheduling. Nothing to really look at there. And nobody else said anything else about Elizabeth, so there you go. Berthoud, let's talk about them. Gideon said this. Made the painful drive to Lamar and still pulled out a blowout win. Hey, shout out to one of their players who had 4 interceptions in that game, by the way. That's insane. Gino said this. Shutting out Lamar, and Lamar is not an easy thing to do. So, boom. And then Cody said this about Bertha. Not as flashy as some of their wins, but this defense continues to suffocate opponents. And a shutout in the bank ain't a bad thing. Yeah. I mean, Berthoud's defense is tough offensively. It's easy to not do anything offensively when your defense is scoring, right? So there you go. Delta's still here at 1. Gino said this. Destroying the academy easily keeps Delta at the number 1 spot. Gideon said, destroyed the academy very thoroughly. And Cody said, what was an interesting game last year was a massacre this year. Panthers stay on top. So there you go. Those are our 2A rankings once more. Wellington just outside. At number 10, Eden. 9, Arvada. 8, University. 7, TCA. 6, Rifle. Tied for 4th is La Junta and Basalt. 3rd is Elizabeth. 2 is Berthoud. Number 1 is Delta still. Delta Dawn. There you go there. Like I said, not too much movement in 2A, but some big games coming up here on the horizon. Now, let's talk about 3A, where there was a solid amount of movement here, but before we do that, let's talk about last week. So, at number 10 was Pueblo Central, 9 Northridge, 8 Northfield, 7 Resurrection Christian, tied for 5th, Thompson Valley Durango, 4 Green Mountain, 3 Holy Family, 2 Roosevelt, and number 1 was Lutheran. All right, this week, a lot of movement in 3A, so let's go ahead and get this thing started here. First things first, Riverdale Ridge, just outside here at 3, but definitely knocking on that door. Gideon had them ranked in his top 10. He said this, doubled up on Thompson Valley. Riverdale Ridge is vastly surpassing expectations. Cody said this about Riverdale Ridge, who he had ranked at 9. Gotta give flowers to one of the bigger upsets this week to put them in my top 10 for the first time this season. So there you go. But yeah, Riverdale Ridge has been playing really well. Gino and I don't have them in our top 10, but they are definitely knocking on that door. And it's possible that they do make it in here in the next couple weeks. So just wanted to shout out Riverdale Ridge, who has been balling out, and give them some credit here. Knocking out Thompson Valley, that's huge. We'll give Thompson Valley a little bit of leeway here, though, as we actually have them here at 10. Gideon has them just outside his top 10, so he didn't have anything to say about them. Gino had Thompson Valley at 10, and he said this, yikes, man, I have no idea what to think about this Thompson Valley team. How do you shut out Loveland and then go and lose by 14 to Riverdale Ridge in consecutive weeks? Yeah, I don't know. I don't. Cody said this about Thompson Valley. They're still here because of their Loveland win, but if they don't find consistency, their league will be brutal. And then I have Thompson Valley right here at 10, moving down almost 5 spots. Or sorry, I have them at 8, moving down like 3 or 4 spots. In our power rankings, they moved down 5 spots. Yeah, Thompson Valley, I don't know what to think. They did beat Loveland, and then they lost by double digits to Riverdale Ridge. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens moving forward, but I'm not going to move them just outside the top 10 yet. I'll let them continue to prove themselves down the stretch here. Now, because Thompson Valley moved down, we do have some changes here. Pueblo Central and Northridge both move up here. They're tied at 8, actually. Let's talk about Northridge first. Gino said this about Northridge, who he has at 9. They pulled out the win against Rangeview, but it was a bit closer than I was expecting, so they stay here at 9. Gideon said this about Northridge, beat 5A Rangeview. By the way, he has Northridge at 9 as well. Cody said this about Northridge, who he is at 7, still undefeated, and another 3A to 5A dub looks great. And yeah, gotta agree. I did expect this one to be a little bit closer than it was last year. I was surprised that they blew them out so bad, as bad as they did last year. And so this was pretty realistic to me. I still had them winning, I think, but this is pretty realistic to me. I had as in last week, I had them winning in the preseason. I didn't think Northridge would be this good, but still pleasantly surprised by that. Now tied at 8 is Pueblo Central. This is what the boys had to say about Pueblo Central. This is what Gideon said here, Destroyed Pueblo County. Central is the best team that's actually in Pueblo. Pueblo West is a separate city. Yes, there you go. Gino said this, they move up 2 spots for me because I'm feeling increasingly confident in their offense. Cody said this about Pueblo Central. Just kidding. Cody does not have Pueblo Central in his top 10 yet. So there you go. But I have Pueblo Central in my top 10. Yeah, I mean, they've been playing well. County is a solid squad with some good players there. County might still make playoffs too, so that I would consider that a win against a playoff team, and I still think Pueblo Central is getting slept on. So there you go. Now moving on here, we have Resurrection Christian here at 7. They basically stay here compared to last week. This is what the boys had to say. Gino said they destroyed St. John's as expected. Gideon said, finish the job in Orlando. Hopefully St. John's will come to Colorado next year. So, yeah, hopefully, as a couple out-of-staters have canceled, it looks like. Cody said this about Rez. Out-of-state opponent and W in a game they finally get to play. Looks great for the Cougs. Yeah, the lack of games have kind of concerned us a little bit. I'm not going to lie. But for now, they stay right here. Moving on, we have Northfield at 6, who does move up 1 spot. This is what Cody had to say about Northfield, who he has at 5. Performed a fatality on Adams City. Holy crap. Gino said this, unfortunately for the Nighthawks, beating Adams City is expected and does nothing for your ranking. Yeah. And then Gideon said this, dropped a 60 on a 4A team. Granted, it was Adams City, but still, yeah. Hey, you scored 60. That's cool, but like the boys said. Moving on here, we have Durango at 5, who stays here at 5. This is what Gino had to say. They beat a nice Meade squad and end up moving up a spot for me after Thompson Valley loss. Gideon said this about Durango, dispatched Meade by 2 scores in Meade, which is tough to do, by the way, so credit to them. A long drive, too. Cody said this about Durango, a solid win on the road, poises the Demons for another league title and run in the postseason. Yeah, gotta love it. I mean, a little shaky start, right? Out of league to start here, start this season. But now we're deeper in the season and they're beating Colorado Talent. Meade is not a bad squad, so love to see that win. Now let's go ahead and get into the top 5 here. Well, Durango is at 5. But at 4, we have Holy Family, who does move down 1 spot after losing barely, by the way, to Roosevelt. Gideon was at this game, and this is what he had to say about Holy Family. Barely lost to Roosevelt. Tough loss, but the Tigers should bounce back. Gino had this to say about Holy Family here. He said this, it's not easy playing against that crowd in Roosevelt, but Holy Family did just about everything they could to make that game close. Anyways, Lutheran is coming up in a couple of weeks, so you already know that game is going to be crazy. Yes, and we'll be sending someone to that game as well. I have Holy Family moving down a spot here in my personal rankings. Yeah, I mean, they played Roosevelt pretty close here. They had their chances. I mean, they just couldn't get it done. Right, and that would have been a huge win in Johnstown. That would have, it would have put them at 2, right? But for now, they're here at 4. Don't get it twisted. They're still a good team. Moving on at 3 is the Lutheran, who's moving down as well. This is what Gino had to say about Lutheran. The long travel to Montrose proved to be too much for Lutheran as they are dethroned of their top spot in 3A for the first time all season. Gideon had this to say about Lutheran. A loss to Montrose made Lutheran look mortal. Not bad, but not great. And then Cody said this about Lutheran here. Not going to punish Lehigh for a long drive game and loss. I'll make them stronger in the box, which is critical for 3A aspirations. Yeah, honestly, I'm not that concerned about Lutheran. For me, they do move down 2 spots because, teams remain undefeated, and that's how close things are here in 3A. They're going to be fine. They literally lost to Montrose last year, and it was at home last year and then they went on and went to state, right? What I am more concerned about are potential injuries, potentially more so on offense, is what I am hearing. That could be an issue here. In a couple weeks, they do play Holy Family. That's going to be a big game. But leading on here, they should beat everyone else. Holy Family will be tough, but other than that, they should beat everyone else here. We got to see what happens for Lutheran here. Things could get a little dicey if they're not fully healthy by playoffs, which is the most important thing, and not the regular season. So we'll just say that. Moving on here, though, we have Green Mountain, who moves up to 2. Did not play this week, but this is what the boys had to say about them. Gideon said, best defense from 1A to the top 10 in 5A. Gino said this about Green Mountain: the inevitable has finally happened as Green Mountain moves into the top 2. They didn't play this week, but it was a productive week nonetheless as they move up a couple spots following losses from Holy Family and Lutheran. Cody said this: Green Mountain, when you remain undefeated and teams in front of you lose, it's time to pop up. So there you go. But now back at number 1 is Roosevelt, still the defending state champions. Cody said this: after only leading barely heading into half, the Rough Riders just grind the win out at home and reclaim their familiar number 1 spot. Gino said this: a close one against Holy Family at home, but they move up to the number 1 spot as they show they are on a mission to repeat after pulling out the win against a top 4 opponent in their own class. Gideon said this: proved their might with the win over Holy Family. Yeah, that's a big one over Holy Family there. I wouldn't necessarily say that was one they needed to win, but that's a good confidence booster moving forward here. They may see them again in the playoffs, so having that film, knowing the blueprint, that'll go a long way. So boom, there you go there. Once more, our top 10 here in 3A after week 5. Riverdale Ridge just outside here, but knocking on the door. At 10, though, Thompson Valley. Tied at 8, Pueblo Central, Northridge. 7, Resurrection Christian. 6, Northfield. 5, Durango. 4, Holy Family. 3, Lutheran. 2, Green Mountain. And at number 1, your new number 1, is Roosevelt. Moving on to 4A, let's talk about what it looked like last week. Just outside was Golden and Monarch here getting top 10 votes. But at 10 was Thomas Jefferson, 9, Loveland, 8, Dakota Ridge, 7, Pueblo West, 6, Broomfield, 5, Montrose, 4, Ponderosa, 3, Heritage, 2, Erie, and at number 1 was Palmer Ridge. This week, there is only one team outside here that got top 10 votes, and that is Fruita Monument. This is what Gideon had to say about them, who he put in his top 10. Being able to travel those 4 to 5 hours and drop 50 on a highly regarded Bear Creek team puts Fruita in my good graces. He also had Mesa Ridge just outside his top 10. He said this: Mesa Ridge just showed grit and they demolished Widefield. I've got my eyes on the Grizzlies. So there you go there. But let's move on here. Instead of there being a 10 team, we have 2 teams now tied for 9th, and it's Ponderosa who's dropping a lot of spots, and Thomas Jefferson. Let's talk about TJ first here. This is what Gino had to say. I was tempted to move them up after they beat Stanley Lake, but they stay at 10 for the time being. Cody said this: TJ, their dominance cannot be ignored any longer, and with a complete flip of last year's script on Stanley Lake, the Spartans are a team that could make some noise. Gideon had this to say about TJ, who he has at 9. Continues rolling. Dimitri Herambopoulos is the epitome of Colorado football in a way. Mostly ground-based, can air it out when needed, plays both ways, plays gritty with heart. So, boom, there's Thomas Jefferson. But now we got Ponderosa, who's also here at 9. This is what the boys had to say about them after Palmer Ridge dismantled Ponderosa, which was a game that Cody and I were at. Gideon said this: their loss to Palmer Ridge wasn't surprising, but I was certainly looking for more fight from the Mustangs. They are on thin ice heading into the league. So there you go. Gino said this, who he has Pondo at 9, by the way. I simply can't cut them some slack after 3 straight losses. Other teams are winning, and Pondo continues to be a victim of that brutal schedule they have. So they dropped 5 spots for me this week. Cody said this about Pondo, who he has at 10. This ranking feels a little unfair since they were with their backup against Palmer Ridge, but Pondo is a sleeper team that can play anybody when healthy. And I agree, I have Pondo currently here, dropping a couple of spots. I think only 2 though. I think they're right here at 7 for me. Look, if they have Marcus Price, then I think this game is a lot more competitive. To start that Palmer Ridge game, they tried Max Mervin at quarterback. That didn't work out. They went with Aurelio Marcial. I don't think he was prepared for that game necessarily. And if he was, and if they played him at the beginning, maybe they had a better chance at winning that game. But it is what it is, right? And, Gino does have a point. They've lost 3 straight times now. They shouldn't have lost to Golden. Legend is understandable. Palmer Ridge, that's just a tough one. You kind of wanted that one to be closer, but it wasn't. We'll see about Ponderosa. Still have a good defense. Still have some good pieces there. But we got to see how healthy this quarterback room could get, right? If this quarterback room is not healthy, and if there's some questions here, then I don't know how far Pondo could go, unfortunately. So there you go. Now Loveland is here at 8, moving up 1 spot. This is what Gino had to say about them. Putting up 63 the week after getting shut out gives me some hope for Loveland. They aren't going anywhere for now. Gideon had this to say about Loveland, which actually, just kidding. He had nothing to say as they are still not in his top 10. Cody had this to say about Loveland. He says they had a bye, but I don't think they had a bye this week. Let me make sure I check that real quick, though. No, Loveland played Greeley Central, unless Cody means playing Greeley Central means a bye, which is a little disrespectful, but there you go there. Moving on here, we have Dakota Ridge at 7. Let's talk about him. Gino has them at 8. He said this: they kept it close for a couple of quarters against a very good Chatfield team, but they will still fall 1 spot for me this week. Gideon had this to say about Dakota Ridge, who he still has at 4. He says, put up 21 against one of the better 5A teams. Feeling solid about the Eagles right now, but another loss might sway me. Cody had this to say about Dakota Ridge, who he has at 7. I will drop them because I feel like the 4th quarter really got away from them, but to be tied with Chatfield at half shows how good this team can be if they can be consistent. Yeah, I'm not super concerned about Dakota Ridge. I think they actually stay here for me. I had Chatfield beating them. If they beat Chatfield, that would have put them up quite a bit, but they didn't. So there you go there. Now at 6 is Broomfield, who stays right here. This is what the boys had to say. Gideon said, squeaked by Bryden. This is a team that the Eagles beat by 40 last year and who is really mid. Broomfield's title defense looks shakier by the week. Gino said this about Broomfield: it was a close game for a while, but they still end up beating a 5A team in Brighton. That win keeps them at 6 in my rankings. Cody had this to say about Broomfield, who he has at 6. A close win, but a win over a winning team. Hopefully gets the Eagles back on track and focused on the remainder of the year. Yeah, I don't know why that game was as close as it was, but they will take that win. We won't drop them for now, but I think all of us on the podcast still feel a little shaky about Broomfield. We'll see, though. Moving on, though, we have 5. Our top 5 here, starting with Pueblo West, who moves up a couple of spots. Gino said this about Pueblo West: while my confidence is slipping a bit for teams like Broomfield and Ponderosa, Pueblo West continues to shine, and I feel more confident than ever to put them in the top 5 after they shut out a far northeast team that was putting up a lot of points so far this year. Gideon had this to say about Pueblo West, who he has at 5 as well. Beat far northeast by less than I had thought. However, a win is a win. I still trust them more than the teams behind them. So there you go there. Cody had this to say about Pueblo West, who he has at 5. A more narrow win, but a win nonetheless. Keeps the Cyclones in the top 5. And then I pretty much have Pueblo West moving up 1 spot ahead of Ponderosa here. So they're now at 6, I want to say, for me right now. And so I feel good about Pueblo West here. They're throwing the ball a bit more than, last year, and they're running the ball well. A good balance here. We'll see how that holds up moving forward, though. So there you go. At number 4 is Montrose, who does move up 1 spot. Gino has Montrose at 4. He says this: taking care of business against the top team in 3A is more than enough of a reason to move them back into the top 4. Gideon said this about Montrose: beat a 3A contender in Lutheran. It doesn't sound like much, but it has been demonstrated that the best of 3A can hang with everyone else. Kudos. Cody said this about Montrose, who has a 4. I'm impressed with the defensive performance against a high-octane offense, even with a classification difference. I have Montrose here moving up a spot. I will say this, it is impressive that they beat Lutheran, but with the injury issues that Lutheran has, it's about meh for me. Also, they won to Montrose, so that pretty much cancels it all out. So I think them being at 4 is appropriate. I've always thought that they were kind of a top 5 team anyways. So there you go. At 3, well, basically our top 3 stays the same though, so I'll just say that. 3 is Heritage, 2 is Erie, number 1 is Palmer Ridge. Let's talk about Heritage first. Gideon said this, blew out a Rampart team that feels destined for the playoffs, continuing to rise. Gino said this about Heritage, they did a nice job against a Rampart team I fully expect them to beat. Next week against Fruita Monument will be a bigger test against a 4 opponent until they play Broomfield in the last game of the year. Cody said this about Heritage here, continues to roll after their brutal opening stretch. Moving on to Erie. Gino said this, they bullied Windsor, who is probably going to be a playoff team. Yes, they did. Gideon said this, blasted one of the better defenses in the state. Still feel good about the Tigers, the Erie Tigers, that is. And Cody said, more dominant wins against playoff teams means Erie is red hot as ever. And then at number 1 still is Palmer Ridge. Cody said this, the Bears, outside of the opening possession, looked like a well-oiled machine in all facets of the game against a competent team in Ponderosa. Remember, he was at that game, so we got to witness it firsthand. Gideon said this about Palmer Ridge. After a shaky first half, the Bears destroyed Pondo in the second. This team is insane. Gino said this about Palmer Ridge. Who's going to beat Palmer Ridge in 4A? I generally don't know if anyone will. And yeah, I'll echo what Gino is saying here. I don't know if there are many teams that will beat Palmer Ridge. The best thing about Palmer Ridge is their consistency. They did have a little bit of a slow start in the first half, but it wasn't that bad, in my opinion. It really wasn't that bad. And they still scored anyways. So I feel great about Palmer Ridge. As long as they stay healthy, which is the big thing, I think they'll be fine. We'll see what happens week to week here, obviously. Well, throughout the regular season, which, I mean, I don't think there are any teams that they're really going to lose to. Vista Ridge is at the end of the season, but they are much better than them this year. So there you go. So they just got to win, continue to get better, stay healthy, get some other guys in there, obviously. And then we'll see them in the playoffs probably, unless they get upset. But, I don't think that's going to happen. So there you go there. Now, that's your 4A top 10. Remember, just outside at 11, basically, is Fruita Monument. Tied for 9 is Ponderosa and Thomas Jefferson. 8, Loveland. 7, Dakota Ridge. 6, Broomfield. 5, Pueblo West. 4, Montrose. 3, Heritage. 2, Erie. And at number 1 still, and remaining dominant, is Palmer Ridge. So, boom, that is your 4A rankings. Let's go ahead and move on to 5A here. Nothing really changed here. I would say for the most part, it pretty much stayed the same here in week 5. There were a couple changes, but nothing too crazy. Before I do that, well, actually, there was just exactly one change, and then it looks like everything here stays the same, I want to say. But before we do that, let's talk about last week's rankings. So we had Rock Canyon, Regis Jesuit, and Chatfield just outside. Tied at 9 was Mountain Vista and Castleview, 8 Grandview, 7 Fountains of Fort Carson, 6 Legend, 5 Arapahoe, 4 Littleton West, 3 Ralston Valley, 2 Pine Creek, and at number 1 was Cherry Creek. Now, going into this week here, let's go ahead and talk about it. Just outside is Regis Jesuit and Chatfield getting votes. Gideon voted for Chatfield. I think he was the only one to put them in his top 10 right now. He said this, continuing to be among the elite. Now we need to see them beat some more quality teams like A West and Ralston before I raise the Chargers. And then nobody else had Chatfield ranked in the top 10. We all had them just outside. Regis Jesuit is here at 2. I have them right here at 9 still here. And look, Regis Jesuit, I still feel pretty good about. They played Cherry Creek really close there, a lot closer than last year, I feel. Still lost, but I don't know. I don't feel good about moving them outside my top 10 just yet. For me, I have them at 9 ahead of Grandview, and Grandview has also looked shaky at times. So, yeah, that's just where I'm at. But let's go ahead and move on to our top 10. At number 10 right now is Castleview. Last week, they were tied for 9th, so they're really not moving up or down here. I will say this about Castleview. They do look good. They do look good, and I'm impressed with their wins. We'll have to see what happens moving forward as they play some tougher teams, looking at Valor Mountain Vista, but we'll see what happens. Gino had this to say about Castleview. They're really starting to get the run game going, with Perry and Gonzalez both leading the Sabercats in a win over Cherokee Trail. I expect them to give Valor lots of trouble next week on both sides of the ball. Gideon had this to say about Castleview, who he has at 7. He said, destroyed Elliot Ming's Cherokee Trail, loving the redemption arc for the Sabercats. This is like Falcon in 2022. Coming out of nowhere to shock the box. So glad I was wrong. And then Cody didn't have really anything to say here. I believe Castleview stayed at 10. Actually, Cody's top 10 in general is exactly the same, so he won't have anything to say, at least when it comes to this segment. Moving on, though, at number 9 is Mountain Vista. Remember last week they were tied with Castleview for 9, so they stay here. This is what the boys had to say. Gideon has Mountain Vista just outside his top 10, but I know he's impressed with them. Gino just said they did not play, and I really don't have much more to say here. I mean, I will say this. It's impressive what they're doing. League play, though, it's going to be huge. You got Rock Canyon, you got Valor. If you're Mountain Vista, you'd like to beat both of those squads to have a good seeding here, as good a seeding as you can here as the playoffs approach now that we're at the mid-season point. At number 8, though, we have Grandview, who stays right here. Gideon said this about them. Beat Pomona pretty well. We'll have to see how they handle their league schedule before I raise them any higher. Gino said this about Grandview. Pomona played them tight for a while, but the Wolves still pulled out the win. They still fall back a spot for me, though, after Arapahoe shut out Rock Canyon. So there you go there. We'll see about Grandview moving forward. Moving on, we have Legend and Fountain Fort Carson tied here at 6. Technically, Fountain Fort Carson moves up 1 spot here as they are tied for 6. Legend stays right here, though. This is what the boys had to say. Gideon said this about Legend. The Titans shocked the Lightning 31-10 and truly showed that they were on top of it in this one. Legend is hanging in there. Gino said this about Legend here. Legend is back to dominating again with back-to-back nice wins. So have to beat the 2 teams I have ranked in front of them, though, if they want to be in the top 5. I believe he's talking about Pine Creek and Fountain Fort Carson. So there you go. I had Legend beating Legacy. I didn't think that was that crazy, honestly. And I heard they still played a sloppy game and beat them like by 21. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Gotta feel happy about that. Talking about Fountain Fort Carson, this is what Gideon had to say about FFC. With Rock Canyon falling out, I feel good about FFC. They continue to show that they can win even without Colton Kamba, but I just hope they enjoy the ride now because the league is going to get bumpy. Gino said this about Fountain Fort Carson. Fountain Fort Carson's route to a top 5 ranking and series championship contention starts the next 2 weeks with league games against 2 top 6 opponents in Legend and Pine Creek. Yeah, gotta agree. Myself and Gino, we're actually going to Fountain Fort Carson versus Pine Creek at D20 Stadium. That's going to be a good one here. It was close last year, so this year is going to be really interesting to see what happens, and we're going to see how well this QB can perform here, and if he can be a winning QB on a contending team. Speaking of contenders, let's move into our top 5. Arapahoe is right here at 5. Actually, the top 5 stays the same. Arapahoe, Littleton West at 4, Ralston Valley at 3, Pine Creek at 2, Cherry Creek at 1 here. Let's talk about Arapahoe first here. This is what Gino had to say. Shutting out a team on the brink of the top 10 is huge. Is a huge statement win for the Warriors. Arapahoe is as for real as they come. Gideon had this to say about Arapahoe. Blaster Rock Canyon, a team I regarded highly there. So there you go. Moving on to Littleton West here. I don't think anybody had anything to say. Gino had this to say. He said, like many other teams on their schedule, Fort Collins is a team you need to be dominating as a top 5 squad, and they did just that. Yeah, Fort Collins is not that good. It's not good. They're not a playoff team, so there's that. No surprises there. At 3 is Ralston Valley. This is what Gino had to say. Logan Madden is clutch. I would have liked to see a bit more separation against a struggling Valor team, but it's hard to complain with a win like that. Definitely a thrilling win. You got to respect it, I think. This is what Gideon had to say. Eked out a win over Valor, but they showed grit and how they did it. Ralston has demonstrated that they can win close ones. Now they just need to widen those gaps. Personally, for me, I'm not even going to lie. At this point, we know what Ralston Valley is. They're a good football team, and they're going to win these close games. Moving forward, now that we're at the mid-season point, you just got to win, right? You just got to win, find a way to get it done, and continue to get better. The margin of victory doesn't matter as much, so I'm just going to say that. Add to, like I said, Pine Creek. This is what Gino said. League games are right around the corner for Pine Creek. The sky's the limit for them, so if they can survive Legend, Regis, and Fountain Fort Carson, that'll be huge. Gideon had this to say. Well, he didn't say anything about Pine Creek. Never mind, so there you go there. We'll agree with what Gino have to say. They play some tough teams here. You would like for them to sweep, but we'll see. So there you go there. Now, at number 1 still is Cherry Creek. Gino said this. It looked like Regis was playing them close in the first half. So maybe the Bruins are human after all. Probably not. Gideon said this. Both Cherry Creek and Pine Creek continue their runs of dominance this year. These two feel like they're on a crash course. I hate to sound dramatic, but this will be the stuff of legends. Yeah, we'll have to see. You know, it's going to be really interesting. So I will say this. Cherry Creek right now is number 1. They're probably going to run through their league. They may lose one game, right? They've lost to Grandview like in the regular season one time the last couple years. I don't know. It's weird. Pine Creek, though, I think personally, if they could go to the state championship, that is their best chance at beating Cherry Creek. You know, they don't. I would not want them to face Cherry Creek in the semis or on the same side of the bracket. And so I say that because these next couple weeks, Pine Creek plays Legend, Regis Jesuit, and Fountain Fort Carson. And obviously, those teams are on the same league. They play each other. And so depending on how this league shakes out, I think is really going to shape the playoff bracket and decide which side a lot of teams will be on here in the playoffs. So we're going to have to see what happens. If Pine Creek wants to stay on the opposite side of Cherry Creek, in my opinion, they got to win out. Now, if they lose one of them, then I think that's an advantage for Cherry Creek because they'll have the higher seed, they'll have home field advantage, and that's tough. You know, Pine Creek, you want to have home field advantage for as long as possible. That really goes for any team. And so if your other teams below Pine Creek, you want Pine Creek to lose so that you could potentially move up. And I'll just leave that up there. So our top 10 in 5A pretty much stays the same, but just outside Regis Jesuit and Chatfield. 10, Castleview. 9, Mountain Vista. 8, Grandview. Tied for 6 is Fountain Fort Carson and Legend. 5, Arapahoe. 4, Littleton West Varsity Football Team. 3, Ralston Valley. 2, Pine Creek. And at number 1 is Cherry Creek.
And thank you, Simon, and all of our sponsors as well, including the one for this segment, Code Red Coaching. Be sure to go to coderedcoaching.com or go ahead and call Cody Rosenthal at 720-979-194. That's Code Red Coaching at 720-979-1914. And go ahead and call or visit the website today, where the grind to greatness starts with the mind. And Code Red Coaching brings us our Week 5 Playmakers of the Week here, where each person who covers the classification comes up with a few nominees and from there chooses a winner on who the Playmaker of the Week is. So I'm going to go ahead and start on the 1A level with Coach V's picks here. We have senior running back Logan Bottier here, 70 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 4 tackles in the 21-0 win that the Lyman Badgers had over Buena Vista. We also have senior North Fork athlete Daniel Owens with 155 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, 9 tackles, and a sack in their 35-25 win over Cedar Ridge. And Chase Reel of Banning Lewis Academy, 120 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. The 1A Playmaker of the week is going to be Daniel Owens out of North Fork High School. Obviously, the win over Cedar Ridge will mean a lot for the Shasta seeding index, and he did basically everything that you wanted him to do on both sides of the ball in this 10-point win to help push the Miners over. Now, in 2A, Gideon had a handful of selections here. Just going to run down them here. You got Kevin Felden, the quarterback out of Devlin High School, 20 of 33, 280 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, and no interceptions in their blowout win over Alameda. We got another quarterback here, Logan Gross, 142 pass yards, a touchdown and a pick, 167 rush yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and then the quarterback on the defensive side of the ball notched 6 tackles, a pick, and also had a rushing conversion in their win over Brush. You also got Marcus Schoenberger here out of Woodland Park, 10 of 16, 147 yards, passing touchdown, rushing touchdown, 5 tackles, 1 pick, and Woodland's first win of the season over Colorado Springs Christian. Sincere Edwards out of TCA, who had 2 rushing touchdowns, 26 rush yards, 10 tackles, and 3 hurries in their come-from-behind win over Sand Creek. Logan Moore of Manitou Springs, who had 191 rush yards, 3 rushing touchdowns, a pick, 6 that went for 58 yards, and 5 tackles in their win over Prospect Ridge. And then Tanner Rast out of Florence, 84 passing yards, passing touchdown, 27 rushing and receiving yards, 10 tackles, and a blocked punt in Florence's win over Forge Christian. The winner is, contrary to what people may believe with some of Gideon's bias, I'm saying despite that, is going to be Marcus Schoenberger out of Woodland Park, the quarterback who helped get their first win of the season over a solid Colorado Springs Christian squad. I have to admit, from my perspective, I did not think that Woodland Park was going to win this game, and Schoenberger's selection here by Gideon, I think, kind of affirms how important his performance was in that win. Now, on the 3A level, I covered 3A this week, and I also got some outside opinions on this, but I have 3 nominees here. One is Gavin Ishmael out of Frederick, who helped the Warriors, or the Golden Eagles, beat the Fort Morgan Mustangs. He went 22 of 33 for 231 yards and 4 passing touchdowns, while also picking up a touchdown with his feet. There was also Bronco Hartson of Roosevelt in their win over Holy Family, 11 of 15 for 194 yards and 2 passing touchdowns, while also going on the defensive side of the ball, having a pair of tackles for loss and a 1.5 sack performance on defense. Marcus McFadden out of Riverdale Ridge had quite the game against Thompson Valley, catching 10 passes for 159 yards and a score, one of those being the longest play of the game, being a 61-yard receiving touchdown and also rushing for a touchdown as well. While I do think that Gavin Ishmael has probably the best numbers and Marcus McFadden played very well in Riverdale's win, I'm going to give it to the guy who brought Roosevelt back to the number 1 spot. Obviously, his teammates played very well in this game. Shout out to Xavier Ramirez and that Rough Rider defensive line that was going crazy. But I got to go with Bronco Hartson, who's a part of that D-line with those tackles for loss and 1.5 sacks. And it's just so rare to see a quarterback dominate up front and get down and nasty with the big guys up front. He did exactly that, and then also brought the finesse to the offensive side of the ball in this win for Roosevelt. On the 4A level, Gino's candidates are as follows. Out of Longmont, he's got Colby Holmes, who recorded 5 total touchdowns through the air, recording 6 of 10 for 190 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then having 57 yards and a rushing touchdown. Not to mention, this freaky athlete had a 77-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. So Colby Holmes on offense, passing, rushing, and then on special teams, returning for scores. He also has Tanner Turch here, 313 total yards of Heritage High School. They got a big win this week. He had 313 total yards of offense and 3 touchdowns, 8 receptions of 124 yards and 2 scores, including a 12-yard rushing touchdown, and 127 kickoff return yards and 50 punt return yards. So Tanner, once again, offense, receiving, rushing, and special teams. Niall Sorrell out of Gateway, one of our first Gateway nominees here, makes his way on here with a 175-yard, 4-touchdown performance on only 9 carries to help Gateway get their first win of the year. But for Gino here, best for last, Jimmer Ware here out of Palmer Ridge, which go ahead and listen to my recap and see how many times you hear his name or his number, which is 6. He recorded 4 receptions for 80 yards and a score. And then on defense, he had 2 picks, 7 tackles, and a tackle for loss, putting together a complete game in that defensive backfield for the Bears, who won over a ranked team and almost knocked Ponderosa out of our top 10. Now, on the 5A level here, you got some big names for some big schools. You got representation from Rowson Valley, Fairview, and Chatfield, those being Logan Madden, who had a massive game, going 18 of 24 for 181 yards, a touchdown, and then 2 rushing touchdowns with 63 yards, scoring all of Rowson Valley's touchdowns. Jordan Rochelle went absolutely ballistic, picking up 5 touchdowns on 19 carries and 190 yards, a 10-yard per carry average for the Knights here and Rochelle's performance. You also got Jake Jones out of Chatfield going 18 of 25 for 384 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and then 2 rushing touchdowns in a win over rival Dakota Ridge. Gino's pick for Playmaker of the Week on the 5A level, however, is going to be Logan Madden because of the fact not only did he score all of his team's touchdowns, but he had the game-winning touchdown pass and 2-point conversion to maintain their number 3 spot. Couldn't agree anymore. Logan Madden, I mean, you want to talk about close games. It was also, fun fact, Rowson Valley's first time ever beating Valor in school history. So, a little bit of a historic win there as well. So, Playmakers of the Week, once again, brought to you by Code Red Coaching. Be sure to visit coderedcoaching.com or go ahead and give Cody Rosenthal a call at 720-979-1914. Are as follows: on the 5A level, Logan Madden out of Rowson Valley. On the 4A level, Jimmer Ware out of Palmer Ridge. On the 3A level, Bronco Hartson of Roosevelt. On the 2A level, Marcus Schoenberger out of Woodland Park. And on the 1A level, Daniel Owens out of North Fork. Those are our Playmakers of the Week here on Playmakers Corner. Once again, brought to you by Code Red Coaching. And if you are listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or anything like that, be sure to hit that follow button. Be sure to flag it. Be sure to subscribe it. Turn on those notifications in your settings so you get notified whenever we have a new episode drop. Or you could receive the same news when you do both by following us on social media, whether that's Instagram at Playmakers Corner, whether that's on Facebook at Playmakers Corner, or X/Twitter at Playmaker Corner. So be sure to follow us on all of those so you get notified. We also share highlights and repost players and stuff like that. So, we got lots of content coming out on all of those. We'll have our power rankings posted as well on all of those, and also on TikTok where we post game highlights as well as our power rankings there at Playmakers Corner. So follow us on all of those. We also post these episodes to YouTube, so feel free to subscribe to us on there. And just stay tuned for more content as we start to head into the end of non-league and into league part of the season and things start to heat up. We are going to continue to cover girls flag football as well. They're going to be having regional playoffs here in just a couple of weeks, and then the state final at the Pat Bullen Fieldhouse as well. So lots of fun stuff coming up here for Colorado football. And I have been your showrunner, accompanied by Gino, Gideon, and Simon, a.k.a. Coach V, signing off.